Hello, this is the RPG Pundit, the final boss in internet shitlords. I hope you guys can hear me out there. And this is episode 14, I believe, of the RPG Pundit Encounter. And for those of you who are already here, and we've got, how many people here? Half dozen or so. Oh, more of that. It's jumping. All right, great. For those of you who are already here, you can tell that I'm, you guys, those of you who know me know I'm very lo-fi at all this stuff. So unlike some other YouTube live streams, I don't have like a big fancy animated introduction or anything like that. So we're gonna wait for, I don't know, about 10 minutes probably, or 10 or 15, depending on how quickly people start trickling in, before I introduce my my guest. My guest this evening is the Dungeon Minister, who is a YouTuber and a real life cleric. He's an Anglican minister, if I'm not mistaken. If I am mistaken, he'll correct me as soon as he gets on. He has a YouTube channel about Dungeons and Dragons and RPGs. Some of you might have heard of him. Some of you might have been brought here by his social media. But I suspect that by the size of his channel, anyways, I suspect that there's probably quite a few of you who are on my end of the subscriber list that might not have heard of him before. So this will be, I like to alternate between bringing in people that are well known, big names in the OSR or in the entire hobby, and people who are not that well known, who are either starting out or whatever, or have their maybe they've had a YouTube channel for many years but have not had that much exposure. Oh, my phone just alerted me that my live stream is on. I'm gonna mute it. All right, and I'll say to all of you here so far, I'll probably repeat this a few times during the live stream. As usual, my live stream is not, I don't put ads in the live stream at the time that I'm that we're live, so as not to cause, because I guess some people don't like that, right? So if any of you are interested in doing super chats, I would be very grateful. The money will go to Domino's Cat Toy Fund, and it'll be very welcome. Also, if this is the first time you've been in the audience of the live stream, you guys are welcome to make comments and ask questions. And I'm not one of these live streamers who will only read people who put super chats, right? So I'd be very grateful if you put up super chats, but I'm not gonna force people to do it just for me to read out their question or something. Now, of course, if you do a super chat, I will definitely read your comment or question. Otherwise, I'll only read the comments and questions I find interesting, right? But as long as whatever you put with the super chat is not something that's going to get me banned from YouTube, then I'll read it out, of course, if it's coming with a super chat. So that's about the gist of how this works. And like I said, when we get some more people in, we'll probably say this again. Yeah, hello everyone. I see D&D Dad and Son is here. Rabbit says, Domino, we summon you. You know what? She was lousy cat. My other two cats were much more interested in showing up on camera than Domino is, right? So Domino was sitting on my lap for a considerable length of time until just before I started getting ready to enter the, I got onto StreamYard, and then she buggered off. She just left. So I don't know if we'll see her or not. She's somewhere inside because it's late here, so I've already closed the door for her. She's not outside, but maybe we'll see her and maybe we won't. She, those of you who watch my regular videos, you've probably seen quite often that I have my video there. It's filming on the kitchen counter there, and in the old days, Meatball or Chungus, they would always come up there and see what was going on. And Domino, it's like she knows and chooses not to appear. So there we are. Hungry Ewok, I'm aware of both of you. Sub to the Dungeon Minister for a few years. Just sub to you. Well, welcome aboard, Hungry Ewok. I hope you enjoy. I suspect I'm more potty mouthed than the Dungeon Minister, but I hope that won't turn you away. Eric C says, I haven't heard of him, but I'm a born-again Christian and a gamer, so we might have some things in common. Well, today we are definitely going to be talking about RPGs, and we're definitely going to be talking about religion, because I guess for some of you, like Hungry Ewok, who maybe don't know about me, I am not a minister, but I do have degrees in religious history and comparative religion, and I have, my specialty is basically the study of religious texts, and the Bible is certainly one of them. And in the context of comparative religion, I tend to keep up with all kinds of events in the world of religion, and there have been a few lately, so we might get to talking about them. That'll depend a bit on whether the good minister, how much he wants to talk about this. But we'll also be talking quite a lot about D&D and RPGs, so stay tuned here. He's going to come on in a few minutes. I'm just giving a little bit more time to see. We're up to about 25 people now. That's quite good. Hello to everyone who's just come in here. The Dungeon Minister will be coming up very shortly. And as you know, this is basically a long-form interview, right? I was originally going to call it the RPG Pundit Experience, but then I realized, Joe Rogan might get pissed off about that. So I called it the RPG Pundit Encounter. And it takes similar vein to that, right? Nothing too fancy. So let's see here. Any other comments so far? No. Well, people are still trickling in. All right. The Jimi Hendrix Experience, yeah. Leather Guru says, I have a question no one wants to talk about. What's with every game going Kickstarter? I got burned on many not shipping for 2 to 3 years. Well, I'm not the one to answer that. I've made a number of videos warning people, not customers, but people who are game designers who want to make their game with Kickstarter. And I can understand the appeal, of course, because sometimes those games get like 6 figures or 7 figures or whatever, right? But some of the people who've made 6 or 7 figures have ended up broke at the end of that, right? Because there's a whole bunch of complexities to that idea. And I myself have never done a Kickstarter for any of my many products, right? All of my stuff is goes to print on demand. It's on drive-through. Some of it is on Amazon. Of course, the Pundit files are in the Red Room store, and I've never done a Kickstarter. Now, I'm not saying I never will, because it kind of depends on my publishers, right? Like, I don't publish my own games. I'm famous enough, luckily, that the small press indie publishers, when they hear that I might be doing a new game, they come and propose it to me. In fact, I've got some news on that subject tonight as well. But if one of them really thought that Kickstarter was the way to go, well, I would look into it. I'd consider it. But one thing I would do, and I tell everybody this, if you want your game to be a Kickstarter, you don't do the Kickstarter first and then write the book, right? Like, you have to be ready with the game before you start the Kickstarter, because otherwise you're just asking for it, yeah. All right, what time are we? It's been 10 minutes now. Let's see how many people are in the chat. We got 31, so I guess we could get started, guys. What do you say? Shall we shall we begin with the dungeon minister? I'm going to bring him in now, all right? Here we go. Let's see if this works. Hello.
Hello, hello.
All right. So, everyone, this is the dungeon minister, and we're ready to begin the RPG Pundit encounter. Now, I'm not sure. Well, I don't know if you've watched any of the RPG Pundit encounter episodes before, but I always start with the same question. The first question is the same for everyone. And of course, for some people, somebody who's been in the hobby for like 30 years and is really well known is probably going to have a very different answer, and a much longer one usually than the one that somebody who's not as prominent would probably do, right? Ironically, just yesterday Friday, sorry, I was the guest on the live stream of the Red Room, and you guys should go watch that live stream later. It was pretty good. And they decided to throw this on me. They asked me this question, right? And I think it took me like a half hour to answer it, right? But I don't think it will with you. So the question is,
fair.
You're a YouTuber on the topics of RPGs. We're gonna find out if you're doing other stuff with RPGs or not. But I know you from your YouTube channel, and of course you're also on X. And the question is, so far in your position as being a hobby YouTuber and whatever else you might do within the hobby, who has been good to you and who has been bad to you?
Who has been good to me? That is a long list. Who's been good to me? I'll go back. I'll try to do it as close to chronologically as I can manage. When I first got on, and I thought, maybe get 100 subs or something. Maybe a handful of people want to watch this. A fellow who is fairly controversial. He would probably describe himself that way. He'd describe himself that way. But Condor DM saw my channel, and he said, "Hey, I saw this channel in some group chat he was in, or on some live stream, and there was a tick up." Around the same time, a fellow named Retro DM Ray, also clergyman who does YouTube of retro RPGs. He saw me and sent some people my way. The Dungeon Delver is Bill Sylvie, has been a real friend to me on the platform. We cross promote each other and pump each other up, and he's been great. As has Yang Zhao, who's the three of us do the Nerd Council of Doom, one of about I think 18 different Nerd Council of Dooms that are on YouTube. So they've been people who very much are encouraging and send people to my channel and I send people to theirs, kind of thing, because we're covering a similar space. Bill Silly, Dungeon Delver, he's first edition AD&D, and that's about all he, that and Gamma World and Call of Cthulhu, but he doesn't really want to be talking about second edition, third edition, and he's always trashing on Beckney, which is what I play. But it's good humored. They've been very good friends to me on the channel. Battle and Barrow, British fellow who does terrain crafting videos. Right now he's doing a series of making his own 80s horror movie themed board game. It's very niche, but he's been doing that for a while, and he's really great. He and I exchanged things. I sent him a little miniature module that I wrote up, and he sent me a piece of terrain, and so we each played it with our groups. That was pretty cool. Someone who's probably deserves way more love than he gets, because he deserves all the love in the world. Dirty Basement Terrain, great guy. He does terrain builds and of a particularly unsettling nature. He has a fascination with baby heads, very strange. Like plastic doll baby heads that you get at a dollar store, but he does things with one of them's it's a altar in the center, and he's got it painted up red like it's been stained with blood, and then down the altar there's these channels cut in the floor which run to these baby heads that are filled up with blood and maggots. I mean, this is it's unsettling. But then you talk to the guy, and he's the most down-to-earth, nicest guy. He gets up at the crack of dawn to feed homeless cats.
Wow.
That's
very good.
Like, he's a tender-hearted guy with these really disturbing things he makes. But he's awesome. He's awesome. He's been sending stuff to me for the convention that's going to happen this coming weekend. He's been for Clericon. He's been sending me stuff for that. Paint Minis Live, another great guy from Minnesota. About take the phrase Minnesota nice and embody it, and that's Bill, the Paint Minis Live Bill. Lovely man, really a great guy. Painted up all sorts of cool things for us. I don't have any of them at hand. I'd have to go. Oh no, I do have something at hand. As I talk, I'll pull it out. One of the things that Paint Minis Live did, the stuff that Lauren's Dirty Basement Terrain did, I think is pretty much all it boxed up and ready for the convention. But one of Paint Minis Live's pieces, just beautiful. Yeah. Undead.
I'm going to interrupt you for just a second here because we got a super chat from Really on the Rock.
You go.
That's £9.99.
Lovely.
Always enjoy hearing new voices within the RPG hobby that I'm not familiar with. Keep up the good work, both of you. Thank you very much, Really on the Rocks. That will go to Domino's Cat Toy Fund. Very appreciated.
I trust Domino is a cat, and not just some guy who likes to play with cat toys. It's actually what you call yourself, isn't it?
No. She shows up in my videos occasionally, and if you look at my posts, I have all kinds of photos of her.
There is a cat. I promise. There's a cat.
Yeah, there is. I'm absolutely blown away that Condor DM. Like, I mean,
of all people,
he's got a very bad reputation in certain circles. I don't think Diversity in Dragons is here. If he was, I think he would have had a stroke at just hearing this, right? Like, but I guess Condor still has a chance of getting into heaven or something, you know.
Condor, you know what? Like everybody has good and bad. Everybody has things that they don't appear well in, and everything. PF things where they're actually really lovely. And I've never had any issue with him. I mean, we went back and forth about the use of minis in role playing games for a while. You know what? I've never had any huge issue with him. I know other people. I think he pretty much picks his fights, and when he picks a fight, he really picks it, and he picks at it. But
and he picks.
Yeah, but I've never had an issue with the man. And I don't know, maybe it's the collar. Maybe he goes soft on me because of the collar. I don't know. But
has there been anyone who's been bad to you?
You know what? Like, in terms of a personality on YouTube, no, not really. I gotta say, no. I've had people leave comments that were sort of off the charts. Like, you're clearly dealing with anger from something else, and I showed up on your screen with a collar on.
What is the internet?
Yeah, and because the comment has nothing to do with what I said. It's just accusations and things that either the person watches a lot of news and a lot of has picked up a lot of the warts that the church does have, let's face it, or whatever, and it has this built up, or has had personal trauma, right? In one case, the person mentioned, personal history of abuse, and which is horrible. But I'll say, in one way, it has nothing to do with me. It wasn't me. It wasn't my denomination. But on the other hand, I accept that comes my way because I wear the collar. Right. And you take the good and the bad with it. And although I am not personally responsible for, this person's pain, I am part of the larger church, pan-denominational, part of the larger church.
Have you ever gotten it from the other side of like someone from some element, somebody who is of some denomination, a Christian, who happens upon your site and says, oh, you can't be a real priest because you play Dungeons and Dragons and everybody knows that's satanic or something like that? Has that happened yet?
No, not once. Right. Not once. No, what I do get is people who lived through the Satanic Panic and it really affected them, and they're stunned, right? And I mean, it has been so long since that was.
It's a long time
current in the church.
Yeah,
and I don't know because I wasn't
the same in every church, right?
It wasn't the same, and again, I'm Anglican, which is Episcopal in the U.S., which I don't think really participated in that. I mean, maybe it did in some places, but the Episcopal Church has always been kind of chill.
It was usually the evangelicals, and at a certain point, kind of conservative factions in North America of the Roman Catholic Church got caught up in it because.
Well, yeah, I have a parishioner whose son wanted to start a D&D group at his Roman Catholic high school and was told he couldn't because it was satanic. So I get people who have had that issue. They've had issues with various things, and they will point it at me. That's the only negative I've gotten. And I will say, other than a couple of cases where it was really just someone looking to be a turd, because it was on several videos leaving comments that were just like, the payback you would get from making this comment is less than the time it took you to write it. It's a pointless thing. Other than that, occasionally, for the most part, I see where they're coming from, and I'm like, yeah, that sucks, And to be honest, part of the reason I do this with the collar on was because I saw that there was this. I saw that there was this pain still out there, left over in my generation, left over from
a kind of outreach.
Yeah, but it was pain left over from the Satanic Panic, and people still
a lot of people don't realize that Gary Gygax was actually a fairly devout Christian, more so in his later years, especially. Right. But the whole time he was doing D&D, he was a church-going guy.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, and if to actually understand what's going on in that genre, right, in the fantasy genre, it's something like professional wrestling, in which these are morality stories. These are like medieval morality plays that are, there's the good guy and the bad guy, and they're so clearly good and bad, but every once in a while the good guy, he falls and he goes bad, or sometimes the good guy redeems himself, or the bad guy redeems himself and goes good. And it's not like, so there's a real clear sort of morality with room for the gray in between, because there are lots of gray spaces in life and in
you can
RPGs.
You can play a group of rogues, right, or a group of villains or whatever, but the in Dungeons and Dragons, the setting is a world that clearly has moral lines, and so even if you're playing counter to type, right, even if you're playing a group of bad guys or a group of mercenaries who are just in it for the money or whatever, that still exists in that world, right, which is one of the things that I think bothers certain people in the new progressive era.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there is a sense of morality, as there is absolute good and there is absolute evil. I mean, it exists in the real world. There's a vast amount of shades of gray between, but there is absolute evil. There is absolute good, and that is not the zeitgeist. That's not the zeitgeist.
In the D&D world, it's literal, right?
Yeah. So,
what is your history with RPGs? Like, when did you start playing, and what sort of things have you played, what's been your involvement?
I was given the red box, the basic set from BECME, the first of the sets, in 1983. I think for my birthday. Yeah, it was very new. It was for my birthday or for Christmas. I was 11. I'm an only child, and we moved around a lot. So finding a group to play with was sort of a weird gift, you know. And I don't know who in the family gave it to me. Nobody seems to remember giving it to me, so I don't know. I do know that a friend of my mother's who has since died gave me a bunch of his old minis and dice. So it might have been from Stephen. It might have been from him, and that's why nobody in the family remembers giving it to me. But, you know, that famously, that player's manual has the solo adventure at the beginning. And I played the heck out of that. I played it as written. Then I rolled up characters and played it using those characters and ignoring the sort of railroadiness of it and really rolling things. And over and over. And then I did eventually find a group to play with in the neighborhood, and we played for a little bit. But they were all older, so and they really didn't want me around, frankly. And so it sat on the shelf, and I would occasionally open it up and look at the Larry Elmore, the Jeff Easley art in it, and loved it, you know, until I was in high school. And it was my birthday, 16th, 17th birthday, I don't remember which. And I had friends over. We were going to watch a movie. We rented Critters, you know, and get pizza. It's just very tame party time. But, and I said, well, I've got this game. Do you want to play this game? Yeah, sure. So I wrote a little adventure for that night. And we watched Critters. We had our pizza. We played the game, and they really liked it. They enjoyed it. And they said, can we do another one? I said, well, I got to write it first. I said, write it. We'll eat pizza. We'll you know, play your ColecoVision, you know. And so I wrote another one, and they liked that. And then at this point, it's like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I write another one. It wasn't very good at all. I mean, probably the first 2 weren't very good. I was a kid, right?
Sure.
But I wrote one, and the only thing I remember about the third adventure I wrote is that the map, if you mapped it all out, you'd get a skull and crossbones. Which was really forcing the matter. I think it became a little too cute after a while. And that one was like, but we were all very tired as well. But then we kept playing after that. So I played for the last couple of years of high school, I would say. And with a group, 3 players and myself. So we had Zeno the cleric and Morpheus the thief and Zephyr the fighter. And I made a map. You know, I took the hex paper from that's in the expert book is a page of hex, and I took it to the library and I made like 100 copies. And I had a map that almost covered my bedroom floor, you know, and folded it out. And I colored pencils. I'm making the whole thing, and I love the creating the world and populating it and having them explore it and having their exploration open up new ideas. And well, I guess I'll put something there. They want to go over there. I'll put something there for them to find. So we did that for a couple of years in high school. We as a friend group kind of dissolved as high school ended, like you do. Went to university, and I had been to Gen Con that was still held in Milwaukee every year at that point. And I lived in Janesville, Wisconsin. And I mean, I worked at there's a Bristol Renaissance Festival. And I worked there every year selling leather goods of all things. But we went into Gen Con one year, and I bought the brand new game at that point, Vampire the Masquerade.
Oh, yeah.
And which I later discovered is actually written by a clergyman's son. Trying to work out some issues, maybe. But so I played that I ran that for some guys in university. When we got to university, met a crew, and we played it a few times. And I set it on the campus, you know, because it's a modern game. So we set it on the campus, which was fun because you knew the place, right? It's, you know, that dorm over there. That's where it is. I played that for a bit. During university, like, you know, I was a theater major, so I was in shows all the time, and it got too busy to do that stuff. And eventually that group, they weren't big old, you know, gamers. And, you know, my theater work and unlike in high school, I actually could, was getting dates, so other things were taking my attention. So I didn't play much after that. I had all of my books, Vampire, Beckme, everything, and I had all of the Beckme sets. Even though I think 4 people in the history of RPGs have actually gotten to the Immortals rules. And we didn't even get into the Masters. We were in early Companion when we fizzled. I had all of them though, and I had a bunch of modules. I never used modules. We never played modules, but I had a bunch anyway. And I had them all in a newspaper, paper carrier's bags that had a paper route. And I lugged them around from place to place, moving houses, moving apartments. I carried them around with me for years until I was in a very small apartment in Milwaukee in my late 20s. And I just thought, I'm never going to use this stuff. And so like a chump, I put it on eBay. And somebody in Germany bought the lot of it. So somewhere out there, Hans, if you've got my books, if the character sheet on the back of the cover has been filled in and the fighter's name is Kang, that's me. I will buy them back from you. But so I didn't have, and I had a job. I had stuff to do, so I didn't do any gaming for a long time. Briefly, there was a stage manager at a theater company I worked for. The stage manager ran a game, and he invited me to join it. It was AD&D, 2nd edition, I think. By that point, it was. Well, I mean, just look at the character sheets. It was far more complicated. There was way more stuff to fill in. And they had their own group already. They really had formed their group. They didn't need another player. And so, I went 2 or 3 times, but it didn't really click. And so that was about it. That was it. Until... fast forward to 2020 and everything's locked down. And I'm now married. I've got 3 kids and I'm putting them to bed, and back me forever. That's right. I'm putting them to bed, and they were trying not to go to sleep. And so they would ask me, questions to keep me. It's like when you have a substitute teacher and you don't want them to get to the lesson plans. So where did you grow up, Mrs. Smith? So they would ask me, well, what about this? And they asked me, what toys did you play with when you were my age? Well, let's see. And at that time, they were 6 and 8 and 11. So, when I was your age, it was Smurfs. When I was your age, it was, Star Wars, and G.I. Joe, Thundercats kind of time, and eventually, then they started expanding because they ran out of their ages and they expanded to older and older, and eventually ran out of everything. And they said, well, what did you play with what toys did you play with when you were a teenager? So teenagers don't really play with toys. I played a lot of D&D. What's D&D? So I started to explain it, and I did off the cuff ran, okay, you're a thief and you have a bow and a sword, and you're a fighter, you got a battle axe, and you're a magic user, you can cast a sleep spell, and you see a cave and you enter it, there's a dripping sound, the walls around you are wet, and up ahead there's a scuffling sound and something shines in the dark. I light a torch, and so can we play that? So yeah, sure, well, we could play that. And I went online and I found that they were now on 5th edition, which I didn't even know there was a 3rd and a 4th. I missed that entirely. I don't even think I knew there was a 2nd. I think I just knew AD&D and Beckme, and that was what I knew. But I saw that and I thought, well, this is a lot to learn. I'll just find copies of the old books that I played with. And I did. I found the old basic books and printed them up, and I wrote a little adventure, and I figured we might play 2-3 times total, and they okay, we've done that, now let's move on.
Sure.
But they were hooked. Partly I think it's because it was something to do with Dad. Some papa's playing a game with us. That's great. And So we started playing, and that went for a while, and then they roped my wife into playing, and she became Fofire the Thief. And when we first started, all three of them wanted to be elves, because if you look at the BECMI character classes, the elf is obviously the best one to play, because at that point you don't understand leveling up and that it's going to take you forever. But they can fight and cast spells. Why would you not? So we had 3 elves.
Yeah.
But then the middle guy decided he wanted to play a cleric. I got hopeful at that point. But then they rescued a halfling who had been trapped by some kobolds and gnolls. They rescued this halfling, and they decided that, and he decided he wanted to play the halfling. And so now we've got 2 elves, a halfling, and a thief, and that's been the group. And and we've been playing ever since.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. So when did you start your channel?
Well, that would have been some months after.
Why did you start your channel too?
So when and why? So I started a few months after we started playing, and unbreaded, and we. As I had been doing the research for finding the books, etc., and I looked on D&D on D&D. I looked on YouTube to see if there was any things, and I had been watching a lot of the Viva la Dirt League, their Epic NPC Man stuff, and they started a YouTube channel of D&D, them playing D&D. It was 5th edition, and so I looked for other channels to see if anyone was doing anything about BECMI, and there wasn't really much. Every once in a while, someone would talk about BECMI as a system, but it was a channel that just talked about various role-playing games. Yeah. Or they might review modules, right? And so they'd review, a BECMI module.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really something that talked about that system in depth. And I picked up the real lingering hurt from the Satanic Panic. People had their books taken away by their parents, and whose teachers and whose clergy and whatever had told them that it was wrong and bad to do. Yeah. I was alive at the time of the Satanic Panic. I was playing at the time of the Satanic Panic, but it never came near me. Like even my really, really churchy grandmother, I mean, she read Tolkien, she read Lewis, she understood that fantasy was not demonic, right? Yeah. So I saw there was still this lingering thing out there, and I thought, well, I should make a channel talking about our game, and I'll do it wearing the collar. I'll do it with the collar on, and just to be a voice of, well, hey, look, that's done now. We are so well past that, and there are Christians who play the game, people of faith who don't hate fantasy, who don't think it's demonic. And because I could tell there was a group of people who were still, hurting from it. So, I made my first video, which I go back and I watch it. People back then complained about the sound, and I never knew what they were talking about because I was editing on a computer with 2 little speakers. You couldn't really hear the sound. Now I have headphones, like, oh yeah, the sound is dreadful at first. But so I started out with that, and in that video, I sort of dismantled the whole Satanic Panic's understanding of role-playing games and stuff like that, and saying it's not what this is. It's a game, folks. It's a game. There's elements of good and evil in it, but you're playing the good guys. And as you were saying earlier, even if you're playing the bad guys, you are playing it in a world that has a dichotomy, and you understand you have the role of the bad guy. You understand that you're evil.
Super chat here from Michael McLaughlin, $2. Thank you very much, Michael. Just subscribe. Love BECMI.
Love BECMI.
BECMI was my preferred game in the old school era too.
You betcha.
And the Rule Cyclopedia, which put it all together too. It was.
Man, Dying Breed tabletop. That's probably the worst I've heard. Dying Breed tabletop. All the stuff was burned and was forced to watch, and then had to go to a cult deprogrammer, which is so like over the top ridiculous. You know, I mean, what an absurd thing to associate cult. I mean, that is awful. That is awful.
D&D Dad and Son points out Tolkien and C.S. Lewis are proof that a religious life and interest in fantasy can work fine together. It's very interesting because, of course, Tolkien's work, Middle Earth and well, Lord of the Rings, is so extremely Catholic.
Yes.
And C.S. Lewis's work with Narnia is so definitely Protestant. Like they have such a particular style to them.
But
they're very good friends.
Very good friends, and both deeply faithful. I mean, both agreeing on the fundamentals.
Tolkien brought Lewis into the faith, really. He never managed to get him Catholic.
He brought him into the faith. It's like, oh, almost.
For me,
he was Anglican.
The best thing that Lewis ever wrote was the Screwtape Letters. It's an unbelievable.
That's a fabulous book.
The nature of evil. Yeah.
That was the first of Lewis's books that I read. Actually, I had been an atheist, and reading that book was part of my my move.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but so that's the when and the why. I did it, and I did it too because we were having a lot of fun, and you game with kids, and the imagination is right at the surface, right? It's like you don't have to dig far to find it. Everything is possible. And so these wonderful stories and great characters were coming out. I'm like, oh, I got to tell that. Yeah.
So right now we've got about 40 some people on the chat here,
hello, people
watching the live stream.
I recognize a lot of names from my own channel and my own stream.
I'm sure that you've got a lot of your own people here, but there's probably a few people who haven't seen your channel. And so nowadays, apart from the videos of you running the game or what have you, what other sort of stuff could they expect to see in your channel?
So the bread and butter is definitely recaps. And people say, oh, recaps, I don't want to watch a recap video, but I promise I don't just like, and then Fleetwood rolled and he rolled a 20. So of course that made me hit, and but the damage, he only did a 2 on the damage. I attempt to storytell. I attempt to make it present in the moment. So that's the bread and butter of the channel. I also occasionally do a crafting video. I do some little stuff here and there. I recently, although not real recently, but I had a jag of, and I hope to get back to. Just turning on the camera for a live stream and painting up some minis, with a camera on my face, but the most of the screen, the minis I'm painting, and just chatting with people. That's a lot of fun. I've done a series of shorts of sort of, ideas, thoughts about DMing and playing the game and world building and things like that. So it's been a slight variety in there. I've had some variety. The lion's share of it is still the recaps. And the problem I'm having recently, though, is our eldest is now in high school and has a job. And all three of them, are in violin, and all three of them, do stuff at the church, and they're in scouts and swim and all this other stuff. And so it's harder and harder to even in our family, it's harder and harder to schedule a game.
Together,
yeah.
So I'm just a little curious about one thing that is kind of off the topic here. But so you had mentioned that you were in the United States, but now you're an Anglican minister, not an Episcopal. So are you living outside of the States now? Are you in Canada or something?
I'm in Canada. Yes.
And how did you get there?
Well, a U-Haul truck, but
draft. So
it's the standard story. I moved countries for a girl. I met my now wife. We'd met on a theater chat room. Actually, she was a stage manager and I was an actor, and we just talking shop. And so when it came time it was around the same time I was discerning a call to the priesthood. And so knowing that I was going to have to move anyway, because there's a seminary just outside of Milwaukee, but I was going to move house anyway, one way or the other. I decided, well, I might as well move to. I thought I might as well move to a place where we can actually see each other like a regular couple, So that worked out. We're married. We have 3 kids, so
Well, very good. All right. So continuing on with the standard questions that I had here.
North Montana. That's further west. You're thinking Manitoba.
Yeah. So I suppose that you must be at least familiar with the existence of the OSR, right? Which is most of the games I make and talk about in my channel is the OSR, which are almost all of them are based. Oh, Baptism of Fire, excellent. they're most OSR games run off the BX system, right? Like there's very few of them that are AD&D for submission based.
They're really settings.
Original white box, but most of them are basic expert derivatives. So I was wondering, have you used some of those products? Maybe not the games, but like the adventures or the supplements or things like that.
No, you mean any of the they call them retro clones or the ones based on the BX. I don't. I just use the old game. I mean, that's the thing about a role playing game. It's not, you don't need a computer to play it. I mean, I tried to play Myst. I really loved that game when it came out. CD-ROM game. I tried to play Myst on my new computer, and the computer won't even. It's like, what is this? What is this trash? You're trying to. I can't read this. This is garbage. But role-playing games aren't like that. It's paper and words and pictures. You can use it the same now as you could in the 80s, right? So I've never felt the need to go to a modern version of an old game. Like if I'm going to pick up a new game, I'm going to pick up Baptism of Fire. It's a totally different system. I'll pick up something that's
fundamentally the very core of Baptism of Fire, or pretty much any of my games, is basic expert, but with a lot of changes in it.
It's a lot different. I mean, I have played in as a player, I've played in Mage's Musings. There's another person who's been good to me. Man, the list. I'll get into that later, but Mage's Musings has had me at his table a few times, and he runs OSE.
Yeah,
which is essentially BX. I mean, that is
almost that is a clone of BX.
Yeah.
I don't write clones, but
right. So there's where I would draw the distinction. I'm not. I will just get the old game, right?
Yeah. But what I mean is, for example, you could take a monster from Baptism of Fire, and you could just directly plug it into an adventure you're running with the expert rules.
I occasionally will lift monsters from other sources. I put a mimic in somewhere. I can't remember where I used it. It was in it was in Bargle's Tower. You remember Bargle, the bad wizard from the basic book. He's become a bad guy. The funny thing is, when he showed up, the boys had all read that book, and they Bargle. Oh, I want to kill him. My wife was like, "Why do we hate this guy?" But she didn't read that. She didn't go. Why do we hate this guy? At any rate,
kill the leader.
Yeah, come on. But
now, do you mostly make your own adventures, or do you use the old modules? Or
I don't. The only module that I've played is we started a game at the parish in the church. And we're playing through we started at Keep in the Borderlands. We've wandered over to the Horror on the Hill, but those are our module, partly because
very classic.
Very classic. It's a nice open sandbox. I started DMing it with the intention of handing it over to my eldest son, who goes by Fleetwood. That's his character name, and that's his online persona. And because I knew I was going to hand it over, I didn't want to write something that was mine and then he would take it. So I figured neutral ground and something that's already established. He doesn't have to write because he's got school and all this other stuff. He doesn't have to do a lot of writing. It's all there. Plug and play kind of. So we do run modules in that group. But other than that, I actually have 3 groups running plus games that I run at the convention. They're all in the same world. The campaign that I wrote for the boys, the family game.
So tell us about ClericCon.
ClericCon, it is coming up next weekend, Friday through Sunday. So some years ago, Bill Sylvie had promised when he hit 1,000 subs, and this seems so quaint because now he's way over that. But he said when he hits 1,000 subs, I believe it was 1,000, he would run an online convention. He says strictly online. I don't have a budget for running a convention or anything like that. Renting the space would cost so much, but I'll run an online convention. And he did, and it was great. GWOC, it's called, Great Underground Online Gaming Convention. And it's focused on old school stuff, So he had run that maybe once, maybe twice. And I got to thinking, I'm a priest with a parish hall.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest budget item, right, is the space. Yeah, and I knew I still have to rent it. I still have to pay for it, but I can get it cheap. And I thought, we're kind of removed from Toronto. We're kind of out in a little village. Where is ClericCon? It is in Glen Williams, Ontario. D&D dad and son.
If any of you are from Ontario, there you go. You can do something next weekend.
If you can find a seat, I have to say. So I said, yeah, why not? Why not? It's who's going to run all the games? Well, I'll run a game or two. Then I thought, well, I know some of these YouTubers who are in the area. So I contacted Mage's Musings. Actually, he and I had already been hooked up. I played at his table once or twice by that point. And so I said, would you come and run a game or two at ClericCon? Sure, I'll run a game or two at ClericCon. It's just outside. He's in Toronto. It's just outside the city. And Tale of the Manticore, John from Tale of the Manticore. These are 2 awesome people, lovely folks. John, if you don't know Tale of the Manticore, if you don't know Mage's Musings, you got to check these out. Tale of the Manticore is a podcast, but he uploads it on YouTube, just sound only. There's just an image on screen holding place, but it's a solo play, storytelling RPG mashup. It's a unique thing. He rolls dice and lets the chaos go where it will, and it's quite engaging. He's on his 3rd season now. I asked him, would you run some stuff? Yeah, I'll run some stuff. And I knew some other people. There was a fellow who was watching my channel. He's since started his own Grumpy Old Slan. He came up to volunteer for something and is now running games. And then I contacted, just thought I'll take a shot, right? And I called a fellow. I contacted Daniel from Bandit's Keep, who at the time was just huge channel for me, because he had like 7,000 at the time. I think he's 16, 20,000, something like that now, but he was a big channel for me, right? And it's funny because I think you think of big channels in the OSR D&D space are just for YouTube, these channels with millions of subscribers, etc. But anyway.
Not so much for OSR. I mean, I'm
not in the OSR. No, that's what I'm saying. The OSR channels.
I have just hit 8,500 subscribers.
yeah. In the OSR, a few thousand is a big player, but in terms of YouTube, it's like,
yeah. Well, when you compare it to the 5th edition guys, that some of them have hundreds.
The 5th edition guys, and let alone Mark Rober or Colin Furs or people like that. Anyway, point is, I contacted Bandit's Keep, and he came along and he brought his friend Todd from Hex Press, and so suddenly we had some great people coming, and then other DMs from local, not YouTube people who you'd know, but really good DMs came and local folks and ran games, and we had it going on. Hey, Wave, you have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, take care.
And we did the first one in 2023, and we had around 50 people. We had 40 some registered, plus some vendors, plus some people who showed up at the last minute. I figure it was 50-ish, upper 40s, low 50s. So it went well. So we did it again last year, and it grew again, and more people came out. We had Bear, the Gen X GM, came. Grumpy was running games. We started Red Caps. Kevin from the Red Caps came, the Red Caps podcast. So, more people, and then again, some people who are local who you wouldn't know via YouTube or anything, but who are in the area are Judge Rumble, and these folks all came. And again, it went really well. And so, hey, we'll do it again. And I thought the only way to grow is to get a bit more space, because we had 5 tables running last year and vendors, and, there just wasn't any more room. So this year I have rented, the village has a little town hall, they call it. It's not a government building. It's just a place you can rent and have parties and stuff. Yeah. So I've rented that for the Saturday. And now we have over 90 people coming. So it exploded. And so when I said earlier, if you can find a seat, it really is at that point. There's a couple of games that have like 3 or 4 spots open. And then a couple other games have a seat. Friday night is full. Sunday, there's one game that has space. The rest of it's full. And Saturday, again, has, there's probably 4 games to choose from on Saturday, and there's only like one seat in a couple of those, so it's really filled up. It's quite good. And next year I'm going to rent it for all 3 game sessions on Saturday, because I think it's one of the limitations I hit, is that there was openings in the morning, but in the evening there's nothing. It's closed up. So I'll rent the space for the evening and have more tables running. So yeah, it's a fun thing, and Bo, we'd love to see you there. We had last year Paint Minis Live came up, and he actually launched his online store at the convention, and it's a lot of fun. Ye Old Geek came last year from the UK. He flew over, and we have an onion eating contest, because my youngest son, his character, whenever we go into an area like a dungeon or a castle or something, and there's intelligent monsters, goblins or whatever, they've got food stores, and I always include a barrel of onions, and Bob Johnny always takes an onion and eats it. So I'm going to eat one of the onions. And so we had the Bob Johnny onion eating contest, where whoever can down this onion first wins, right? Mm-hmm. So that's been fun. All right. It's small, it's intimate, it's friendly,
Mm-hmm. Well, those are some of the best cons in my experience. Yeah. I'm going to take a moment here to comment to everybody who's here at the moment, in case you weren't here at the beginning, that you guys are welcome to have to ask questions of the guest or me, I guess. If I think that they're a good question, I'll bring them up. You are also very welcome to give super chats. Where right now the live stream, when it's live, is not monetized, so you can if you want to give a donation to my cat's toy fund, you can give us a super chat. And if you have a question with the super chat, then I'll definitely ask it. But it's not that's not obligatory. You can ask a question without it doing a super chat if you want. Unless it's going to get me in trouble with YouTube, I'll read out your super chats, of course. So I was, one of the things I was. Oh well, hang on here. I guess we've got an immediate question here from the Rabbit. What pantheon do you usually run in your D&D world?
All right, so because I have really pretty much just have this one campaign that keeps growing, because there's a game we play at what started at the local game shop, but now we actually play it at the parish offices because the game shop closes too early. And then we have the parish game, but that's in a separate thing. But I have it online because I got patrons for my channel, and patrons it's a game for patrons that we play through Discord. So all three of those run in the same world. So it's really just a world. When we started, the first two games we played, at least the first game, we played it at the church offices. My wife was doing an online course and had an exam to take, and the house has to be empty because you don't want a 6-year-old coming and telling you, the answer to a question of medical law. But anyway, they had to have a totally empty. So it was the layout of our house. It makes it hard to corral them in one place. So it's just easier to just go. And we went to the parish house and played the game there. And because we were there, I set it in essentially a medieval D&D version of that village. So the pub down the road is the Copper Kettle Pub, and it's the Copper Kettle Pub in the game. And so in the game, there was the church. And so when we first started, I thought we were going to play like 2 or 3 games, 2 or 3 sessions. I didn't put a lot of thought into it. But it sort of was established just by being in the atmosphere that the church was the church. I did decide, though, that it would be later when I did have to give thought because the world started to develop. I said, okay, I decided that the religion would be essentially Christianity before the incarnation. And you might say, well, that's just Judaism, but it's imagine a version of Judaism in which they know that the incarnation will happen. Like it's not the Messiah as a great leader figure or a great religious figure. It's specifically that God will. So that's essentially the model. But because it's pre-incarnation, there's less of a the very Protestant personal relationship with God kind of thing, right. Personal relationship with the incarnate God. So the saints become the important figures. Yeah. And so clerics aren't clerics of different gods necessarily in the kingdom that we're in. Outside of the kingdom, there will be other religions. And I've touched on a few religions that were in the kingdom in the past, like a sun worshiping one and a death worshiping one. But within the kingdom, different clerics they might be clerics of different saints, but they all are part of the same religious school of thought generally. Right. So we've got Saint Cuthbert and other I took a bunch of obscure, like Saint Necton, Saint Marnock, and things like that for the characters that populate the place. And partly the religion developed with the map because I started with the village and a nearby set of caves. And then I added an abandoned keep and a lake above that and some mountains. And then I went down to the local seat of power, which was Kilmarnock, which I just looked at a map of Scotland and said, Kilmarnock's a cool name. We'll call it that. And then you're like, well, Kilmarnock means the monastic cell of Marnock. So Saint Marnock, okay, that's who founded the city. So it developed that way.
That's very interesting. It kind of leads into what was going to be my next question. It's like, how has your faith affected your engagement in like RPG DMing and in other senses related to the hobby?
Yeah. I mean, I will say partly, in one sense, because I was a gamer before I was a priest. And I was a gamer when I was an atheist.
Sure.
My gamer synapses are all pretty well connected already. So what does develop, I will say, what does develop is when a question of the character's morality comes up. There was an adventure where there was a cave full of ogres, and they defended themselves at first, and then they went and they attacked the ogres, and then they discovered a bunch of oglets, a bunch of little kid ogres.
Yeah.
And then they had that, oh no, kind of moment, like, oh dear, what are we going to do? Yeah. And they decided not to kill them. But they did tell the surviving adult ogres, you got to get out of here, because if you don't, we're coming back here with a bunch of elves and you're toast, and even when they went away, some of the surviving ogres chased them and attacked them, and they had to kill them then, but the babies they didn't touch. So they bringing up those sort of moral dilemmas becomes an element of it. Obviously setting it in a world that is essentially the religion in the world is called the Way, which is what Christianity was known as in its early days. Has an effect on it has an effect on the morality in given situations, but it also has just have an effect on the world, right? I mean, the world that we know, the history we know of Europe, even the things that don't seem to have anything to do with faith, lived in a world soaked in the Christian faith. And so their existence is tied to that,
absolutely. In all of my medieval authentic products, I make a point of, in the introduction, for example, of talking about how, like, you can't really, certainly at the very least, you can't have a really medieval type of setting without having monotheism involved, right?
Yeah, that's it. I mean, it doesn't actually work. Now you can do a system where it's a pagan pantheon, or a multi, but you're going to get a different world.
Incidentally, D&D is really terrible at how it presents religions. Like almost any of the, look at any of the established settings, right? And they're all supposedly, what you could call pagan pantheons, but they don't act like a pagan pantheon does, right? Like people are like, well, I'm a follower of Pelor, right? The sun, and that's it, right? Just that guy, right? And so it's not, that's not how any pagan religion ever worked, like if you're running an authentic, like the Romans didn't just say, well, I worship Hermes, that's it, right? No, you would the whole point of a pagan pantheon is you go to the god that has the portfolio that you need at any given moment, right? So if
you may have a favorite. You may have a favorite. You may have one that's your go-to.
If you're a priest of one of these gods, right?
Yeah.
But it's like the whole thing is set up in a very funny way, and of course the irony is that nowadays I'm running 3 campaigns right now. Now one of them is World of the Last Sun, which is a Gonzo game, but the other 2 are Baptism of Fire, which you showed a little bit before, and the other one is Sword and Caravan, which is a setting book for running our adventures in the time of the third crusade until the Mongol invasion, and it covers the whole Silk Road, right? So like in those 2 campaigns, the characters are all, well, in Baptism of Fire they're all Christians, and in Sword and Caravan it's Christians and 1 or 2 characters who are Muslim, and, it's very it makes it a very different kind of setting than what you would expect in a normal D&D.
Absolutely. Well, and for my campaign, the players they're just sort of sensing the edges of this, but the major conflict is actually not one of political powers, but of the death cult, which had been dominant in the area, and Marnock was the hero who put an end to the last of the death cult priests. That religion was never entirely eradicated. It went underground and was taken up specifically by werewolves. Yeah. And those werewolves are being used by Bargle and a number of others. And so the real conflict is actually a resurgence of this death cult. Yeah, right? Yeah. They're only sensing the edges of it now.
Yeah. Well, you see that in Baptism of Fire, you see that, and it's in a context of like the history or pseudo history of the development Christianity in Poland, right? That
Yeah.
there's this story, right, that Mieszko the First was the first ruler in Poland to convert to Christianity, right? And at that time there was all these different, Slavic pagan centers, some of which, like if you look at the sources, some of them seemed like, they were kind of okay. They were, there were some places in Poland that had a mix of pagans and Christians in the area, and they were tolerant to each other. And then there were other ones that were like just presented as absolutely evil, right? And there was this one mountain called Lisagora, the mountain of witches, right, that had a temple to the goddess Marzana on top of it. And supposedly on the day that Mieszko was baptized, the temple was destroyed by lightning, right? It was wrecked. And then later on, Mieszko's son Boleslaw the Brave had to fight a battle against the pagans that were around Lisagora, and kind of wanted to stick to their evil ways, and he defeated them, and then they put a Benedictine monastery on there, which still exists to this day. So it's that sort of stuff. It's kind of legend, but in my medieval authentic games, I treat every legend as real. So that
right, yeah. Well, that's you're working in a world of magic, and so yeah, you take those things as given. And there are werewolves in the forest, and there are vampires, and all that kind of stuff.
So I'm curious to know what I presume even though you're in an Anglican church, you still have some parishioners, I would hope. And I'm wondering, have any of your, like, I assume your parishioners know that you run D&D games and stuff like that. Have any of them had given you weird looks for it or something? Because even outside of the question of like satanic panic or something like that, it seems an unusual hobby for a minister to have.
You'd think that, but you'd be surprised how many clerics there are playing the game.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of us, actually, a whole lot of us. I mean, priests are big old nerds. And so
I can imagine as a religious historian, I think I would say the same thing about my own academic background.
Well, we're either collecting comic books, or we have a model railroad in our basement, or
model railroad is kind of a stereotype, isn't it? Like
it's up there. Yeah. Well, actually, Anglican clergy particularly are responsible for a lot of the early botany and entomology and nature studies, because they didn't have much to do. There's a section of Anglican history where the priests literally was, they preached on Sunday and they visited old ladies and had tea. And that was kind of it. Occasionally someone's sick, you go visit the sick person, but there wasn't the administrative load that priests have today. There wasn't and their whole world was Christian, so they weren't doing any evangelism. They weren't doing any outreach to people who didn't,
unless they went to go, evangelize Nigeria or something. Right?
Yeah, they were off on some mission somewhere, but the
typical one.
So so Anglican priests having weird hobbies is an old and glorious tradition. No, my parishioners, no, they look at me with a sort of tolerant amusement, because it is the parish hall that we rent, and because the last 2 years, last year and this year again, the Saturday morning of the convention lines up with the monthly breakfast. When I thought, well, great, more customers for the breakfast. We'll just, in the morning you can come and get breakfast. What that means, though, is that the people coming for the breakfast, the local people who come down for the breakfast, the parishioners who come to the breakfast, are eating their breakfast in the middle of a hall that's decorated for a D&D convention, a role-playing convention. And we have stuff on auction, right? Terrain pieces and games and stuff. There's all this weird stuff. And the vendors are like, well, yeah, I'll come in Saturday morning. There's other people who want to buy my stuff too. So, Anglican priests solving murder mysteries between visits to the elder. There you go. Although I think Father Brown is Roman Catholic, and he's got the primary market corner there.
Or if you want to go medieval authentic, Cadfael, right?
Yeah, Cadfael. Fabulous books. Fabulous. I actually stole the plot of one of those books for an adventure that we ran.
I always meant to. I've never gotten around to it. It's funny because I've written, more medieval type adventures than anyone, but
right.
I think that I never got around to directly ripping off Cadfael.
Oh, I stole the sort of it's the Hermit of Eaton Forest is the one that I stole, and it's just the sort of structure of it. It's not characters, but anyway, that was a fun
one. Have you made use of the Bible as inspiration in your RPGs, campaigns, or worlds?
Actually, it's funny. We were talking about this kind of thing on the way to church today, about how many stories are really reworkings of old stories. And
I mean, the Old Testament in particular is a collection of these stories that often you find parallels in other religious texts, right?
So I mean, even when you were talking about the mountain of witches and the temple, I was thinking this is very much Elijah and the two altars, right? Calling down fire. No, I have not. I have not consciously mined scripture for stories for a couple of reasons. One, they're PKs, and so they know a lot of the stories, and they might, jump to the conclusion. But also because I really, for the same reason that I made the faith in world not just be Christianity, because spells are a thing in D&D, and there's probably enough wrestling with, but I prayed and nothing happened, right? The vending machine image of God, without attaching to it a system of magic which depends on the roll of a dice. It's like, well, did your cleric not believe? I mean, and again, having started the game with relatively young children, playing the game while also going into the complexity of what prayer is and the nature of prayer is like, what? That's a lot for a 6-year-old. It's a lot for an 8-year-old or an 11-year-old. So I decided to not introduce things that were overtly Christian. Now, that said, so much of our supposedly non-religious fiction is influenced. We were talking about sort of stories, and somehow we had gotten on the subject of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and I said, well, that's essentially that's what the Hulk is, right? The Hulk is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Of course,
And we went to see the Fantastic Four movie. Well, that's the trolley problem turned into a movie, isn't it? So much of literature. I read them Frankenstein in October last year. This year we're reading Dracula. And Frankenstein, Jurassic Park is just reworking Frankenstein, right? And Pygmalion is,
And in a way, Frankenstein is a descendant of the legend of the Golem, right?
the Legend of the Golem and Pygmalion. Well, I mean, modern day Prometheus is what
modern
Shelley called it. So that said, there are things which show up in the stories, in the adventures, that will have resonances, not necessarily to biblical stories in a sort of one-to-one fashion, but may raise some of the same questions or some of the same themes, some of the same kinds of imagery. that's certainly going to happen, even if I didn't want it to, because I'm thoroughly Western. I'm soaked in the literature and the culture of the West. It's there. You can't escape it, right? It's part of our inheritance, our intellectual inheritance. So
yeah, it's very fascinating. The Old Testament in particular, it has these elements of these stories that are, I mean, I don't mean to say, I'm not suggesting that they aren't actual things that happened or not,
right.
Keeping out of that argument, right? But that they have mythological resonance.
Yeah.
But then you also have in the Old Testament, essentially, that God is doing a genetic breeding program to create the Messiah, right? And you know where there's the biggest proof of that? Let me see. I don't know if you've run into this this example before, right? So the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, right?
Mm-hmm.
God is going to destroy Sodom. The only good man in there is Lot, and so he will spare Lot and his wife and his daughters, right? And they head off, and they were warned not to look back. Lot's wife looks back; she turns into a pillar of salt, right? And there's enormous debate in both Judaism and Christianity in terms of exegesis about why was she turned into a pillar of salt, right? You can go with something as simple as, well, God gives you an order, you don't break that rule, right? That's the easy out, right? Yeah. And then there's others that are, well, her turning back was symbolic of having been attached to the lifestyle that she got to have there, that she was her desire for the world overwhelmed her desire to obey God and things like that, right? But there's actually another context to all this, right? So after Lot's wife is turned into a pillar of salt, they end up, Lot and his daughters end up in a cave. The daughters say, that their dad is the only man left alive, right? This is not a story you normally tell kids, right?
It is strangely left out of the Sunday lectionary cycle too.
Sunday school, you don't learn this until a lot later. So they both decide to sleep with their dad, right? To try to preserve the human race, right? They both get pregnant, right? And one of them, her son becomes the eventual patriarch of the Moabites, and the other one of the Ammonites, right? And the thing is, there's a whole school, especially in a certain school of rabbinical interpretation, that says, well, the real thing, the reason that Lot's wife had to be turned into a pillar of salt was so that the Messiah would eventually come. Because the daughter whose son became the head of the Moabites, right? That allowed the Moabites to exist.
Yeah.
One of the Moabites was Ruth. Right? And Ruth marries Boaz. And a descendant of Boaz and Ruth is King David.
Jesse and David, yeah.
A descendant of King David is Jesus. So if Lot's wife hadn't been turned into a pillar of salt, there would have been no David and there would have been no Jesus. Right? It's God playing genetic scientists,
Yeah, there's a huge amount, and you could even play with why salt specifically. Salting the ground after you've defeated a foe, salting the ground, but then you are the salt of the earth.
Yeah, there's both of those. Yeah,
sure. Salt on the earth was not necessarily a good image. It was what you did to a land you didn't want to grow anything. So
that's right. And in fact, the land itself remained devastated after that. Right?
Yeah,
that was that's an area that to this day is not a fertile area in Israel, right?
There's an interesting question there from Drew Enders.
RPG Pundit and guest, what are dynamic ways to put together events that reflect the views of a patriarch of a faith, and when that changes or when the office succeeds to another? Well, I don't know. That's a question that depends a lot on the nature of the faith, right? Because you've got some religions that depend on ancestry, for example, right? So the Shiite Muslims, you have to be part of this line of descent of the prophet, and then in others, you have, in Rome, you have an election, right? And then you have the white smoke, and you pick the guy that But it's supposedly that the cardinals are inspired by God to choose, right?
Well, and you could even, speaking of that, you could look at the last 3 papal elections, and or even go back 4 or 5, right? So you had reform in the church, and then you get a conservative pullback. Well, hang on now, let's not go there. And then following John Paul II, there's Benedict. It's like, we need to solidify this tradition. But what's the reaction to Benedict is Francis. And so there's and you can see the effects that it has on perception of the faith, if not the actual living out of the faith, right?
Well, you know that I live in Uruguay now, right, which is right next to Argentina, which is
yes.
And so actually, everybody in the Southern Cone knew this guy before he was Pope, right?
Yeah.
And the thing about Bergoglio, about Francis, is that he was obliged, because of the nature of the political environment in Argentina, to become a master of manipulating the media, right? Like he was at different times fighting with the left-wing Kirchnerista government, and at other times with right-wing elements in the society as well, right? And so he would, because he himself was quite progressive, but definitely not of the school of the kind of Kirchnerite, who are very much like kind of Chavez type socialists, right? And so I'm pretty sure that the thing that happened was that there were all these scandals that the media was running all over Benedict, right? Like he was a brilliant, Benedict was a brilliant academic, but he was definitely not a media savvy guy, right? And they chose a cardinal that was probably the most media savvy cardinal ever. And during his entire papacy, Francis would go and say this stuff that the media would just devour, right? Like, the
lapping it up.
and we have to be kind to gay people, right? But he never actually really changed almost anything, right? Like it was all manipulating the media to get for them to hear what they wanted to hear without actually altering any of the course,
Yeah.
So it's very amusing.
I will on a specific game example in the game I'm running. I call it the Hooded Goblin, which is the local game shop game, the game store game, although it isn't played at the game store anymore. But anyway, it doesn't matter. In that game, they're in a city of the same world that everyone else is in. But it's a free city. It's not under a lord. I took London as the model. It had its own liberties. It had its own freedoms. And so in that city, one of the most powerful figures is the bishop. But she is actually a worshiper of this death cult. But she's maintaining the illusion of being a bishop of the way. So she's moved up through the ranks of the church and along the way been corrupted. And so the way she runs the church...
You're not basing this on any real life bishop, are you? Okay, just checking.
But the way she runs the church is very surface and about appearances. And so the interior of the cathedral there is redesigned to be this very imposing and grandiose scale. And she is a power player in the city. Well, the players there had cottoned on to her, her corruption and worked to bring her down, and eventually did in a pitched battle in and around the cathedral, in which the dwarf, who's just been so much trouble the entire campaign, the bishop is fleeing and he throws a spear and he rolls a 20. Yes! And he rolls max damage, and it's just enough to finally end her. It was the most brilliant movement. But her successor comes in, and her successor, he's only temporary, but he was in the position of second in command because he was pliable, because he was, he didn't have a strong personality. He was easy to manipulate. And so suddenly this power player has become this sort of mealy mouth, sort of weak, and it has changed the character of the religious atmosphere and even the city. It's become a place now of chaos because he's just not a strong leader. And so, you know, in terms of succeeding specifically in an office, you had huge.
That's true to history, right? Because there were terrible, not just popes, but other religious leaders, and all through history that were really bad people, but that actually ran the institution very strongly. And then there were really wonderful people who were just useless at the job.
Yeah, nightmares.
So I wanted to ask you, like, I don't know how much you keep up with modern day D&D, with like the Wizards of the Coast D&D and stuff like that.
As little as I can.
Okay. Because one of the things that has come up now is that, like, just this week, Dungeons and Dragons has made they've decided that they're doing like Pride Week in October for Dungeons and Dragons and Magic the Gathering. They posted an image that is like this ridiculous pastel colored image of a gay couple and surrounded by monsters that are all happy about their gay romance and stuff. So like they're tripling down on something that has basically destroyed their entire marketability, right? Because the newest edition is full of this stuff, and they haven't. It sold worse than any edition ever.
Yes, not selling many units. I have to say, first of all, I'm pretty sure I've seen that image before. If I haven't seen that image, I've seen one darn like it.
Oh, they've done a lot of those sort of things, right? This is just another variant on.
Hey, like, there's Whizzer. Whizzer is in that campaign in the game I just described about the bishop. He's
favorite OSR guys. Great.
He's saying that so that Heston, his cleric, won't get killed in the next game. But so first of all, I swear I have seen that image before. Mm-hmm. That, or it was some sort of nightmare I had a year ago, and I manifested somehow.
They've done a lot of images. They've done the one about the gay dwarf bakers and stuff like that. It's a lot of nonsense.
I'm going to say, not even about the social content of the picture. It's just bad art. I mean, when I looked at it, I thought what it looked like to me was the concept sketch that you put together to show the editor before you commit to a real painting.
It's Tumblr art, right? Like the people they have now doing art for D&D are people who are mediocre at best and recruited from leftist circles that engage mostly in like Tumblr fetish art when they're in their spare time,
Well, and it's just not. It was the other thing is talking
like you compare that to Elmore, right? Like you compare that to like one of the things that made D&D was the art, right? Like all the way from like at least from the AD&D Player's Handbook, right? Like from that point onward.
Well, and I noticed also in that picture, the tagline that went with it was something about "It's your adventure to play" or something like that. It's not an adventure. They're having a party. The kobolds are dancing.
Wizards of the Coast has intentionally, like the people there, basically they don't like the concept of morality or heroic fantasy or any of those things, and they've said it outright that what we want is for D&D adventures to be not actual, combat focused heroic adventures. We want it to be slice of life, right? Which is like, for example, Fritz Haven, where you play students at a magical college who are working at the bar, or rather at the coffee shop, and are a hot mess for prom, like that sort of thing.
Now, is that an official WotC product? I know that the thing where you're product. I thought that thing with where you're a barista. I thought that was a third party. But anyway,
no, that was okay. That part of it, yes, was a supplement, but was specifically made to be linked with
Strixhaven. Yeah. So
Strixhaven. Yeah, sorry.
And
but
I don't know if
it's full of that nonsense.
Does this all come from like? Is this downstream of The Sims or something. And when The Sims came out, we remember Sim City, and I played that game on when it was out because I can't build a city. I don't have the money to do that, so I played a game. But Sims was just like, just live your life. Man, I've got a life to live out here. I don't need to go to the computer to live this life.
I guess it could be a little bit of that because that was, millennial tripe. And really the audience of late 5th edition is largely aging millennials, right? It's not really that popular with the teens anymore, like for obvious reasons. The teens are in general now sick of everything that was forced on them. Like when you think about it, right? You and I we're very close in age, clearly. And when we were kids, everybody that wanted to take away our fun was largely, on the right, like they were the church ladies that didn't like D&D or heavy metal music or wrestling or any of that stuff. Like everything that we were being oppressed over was from that, right? But Gen Z kids, right, and Gen Alpha kids too, have their entire lives, the only people who have ever oppressed them is the left, right? Because the left
and people taking away the fun.
Every institution, So this is why Gen Z is now more right wing than any previous generation alive right now. Like, it's incredible.
It's the way it always goes. Whoever's got the power, is going to be the one attempting to set the parameters of discourse and what is allowable to say and do. And so the natural teen instinct to push against whatever is out there and whatever is trying to contain that sort of spasmodic teen energy, is gonna fight against that. I did a poster. Just there's a lamp post, a street light in front of our church, and every once in a while I'll do something weird and put it on there. Like I did those tear off things. You could poster and you get the phone number you tear off at the bottom. I did one with like haikus. Just for people passing by, just tear a haiku off and go, or weird. But I just did one of a crucifix, and you want to rebel, spend time with a convict, a death row convict, and because that is if you want to be countercultural now. It means you're going to be, countercultural is get a job, get married, have kids, horrors.
Well, and I think that is directly linked to the fact that in the last year, the sales in North America of Bibles have gone up 42%.
No.
So like there's very clearly a resurgence of Christianity.
There's something going on. No, we've seen it with people in their 20s. The families with little kids. They're like, I think we want to tie into something here. We want to hook onto something that's not ephemeral, that is eternal.
And that's a return to that. Oh, here we go. $10 super chat. Thank you very much, Michael McLaughlin. I have Gen Z co-workers interested in D&D. I promised to run if I could use rules I was comfortable with. Gave them a POD of Rules Encyclopedia, and I've been running adventures based on that, not by Vivo. That's good, Michael.
Yeah.
I would also say check out the OSR.
There's a lot of good stuff out there, though. There's a lot of good stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
this is the thing.
If you want to play a game where you play explicitly Christian characters, there's baptism.
So Fleetwood, our eldest, ran that for us. This was a while back now. He ran a few sessions of that. We played like an adventure in it. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I think I got killed, but it was fun.
Well, it is a pretty lethal system.
Yeah. No. But when Michael's talking about here using the rule cyclopedia, as I was saying near the beginning, right? When you were asking about OSR stuff and about the retro clones and whatnot, just use the old stuff, right? If you're going to use if you're just going to run a BECME system or a BX system, just run BX. If you want, obviously Baptism of Fire has a lot of, first of all, flavor, but also mechanics that are different and things like that. But if you're really just looking to run BX, just run BX, because like you can find it online.
Well, all the clones, the clones were the first thing that was created in the OSR. It's what we now call.
And it has to happen. It has to happen.
Right? Those happened at a time when you couldn't buy the books, right? Like, well, you could find really old ones, but they were becoming increasingly difficult to buy, the old copies. And it was before print on demand brought all of that back, right? So at that time, it made a lot of sense to have these like direct clones. Since then, it makes a lot less sense, but yet people still buy it. Like I'm always kind of surprised by that, right?
Well, I think because print on demand is fine, but like if you want to get a book that feels like a book, something that's made to be that book is probably going to hold together. It's not going to hold together any better, but it's going to feel more official, I guess, to have a book that.
I suppose, but I mean, lately the drive-through, the printing that drive-through does is quite good, right? You can get
it's not bad.
Hardcover Baptism of Fire downstairs, and
my boys
much better than they were in the past.
My boys really like the
yeah, put some likes here. Help out the live stream, guys.
My boys really like the books from Kwood Publishing. It's a Canadian publisher, and they do monster books and things like that. And it has a kind of cartoony artwork to it. But they really enjoy those, and those are I saw conversations about Kickstarter up at the beginning. Those were all Kickstarter stuff. But it's from a company they've been doing this for a while, so they're going to follow through. They've got a track record and everything. They go through RPG, RPG Online, Drive Through RPG. They go through Drive Through RPG, and they're good quality stuff. They're good quality stuff.
So I can't really have an Anglican minister here without wanting to ask you a few questions about current things in Anglicanism.
Do not blame me for Henry VIII, okay? I mean, he was a little.
But so you're about to have. I mean, the new Archbishop of Canterbury has been elected. As a woman, Sarah Malay.
Well, she's been appointed. Archbishop of Canterbury appointed, and she hasn't been installed yet. I think that happens in January.
No, at the beginning of the next year, I believe. Yeah. But there's already serious controversies around her, and I was wondering, do you have anything to comment on that? Like, she has openly been made statements that are pro-abortion, right?
Yeah.
Including the right of a mother to abort a baby that would be born with certain disabilities, right? Like Sonnet 17.
Yeah.
She's pro-mass migration. She supports blessings for same-sex relationships.
Yeah, well, and Bo, it's not even the coming schism, Bo. It's actually been realized. A number of the national churches have announced that they're no longer in communion.
GAFCON, right? GAFCON has now said we're going to elect our own primate, right? Like,
and they're not saying.
Explain to the. I am assuming that not everybody in the crew is either Anglican or informed about Anglicanism. Yeah. So there has been for some time now a split in the Anglican Church, and that split has gone along the lines largely of the let's say the English Church and Canada and like the Anglosphere countries. Most of those are sticking with what's called the Lambeth Conference and consider the Archbishop of Canterbury to be the primate of the Anglican Church, right? But GAFCON consists of a larger number of Anglicans than there are in the Lambeth side, right? Who are mostly from the third world countries that the British Empire brought Anglicanism to, And they've said, we want nothing to do with this. They point out our Anglican Article 20, which says that the church cannot ordain anything contrary to God's word. And for a long time, it's starting with the ordination of women, right? And going on to things having to do with LGBT stuff and all of that. They've said, this is not the correct church, right? And now, because of the fact that the Archbishop of Canterbury is apparently going to now be a woman, they've finally said, we will not recognize the Archbishop of Canterbury. We will select our own primate, which is the term for, it comes from primum inter pares, right? So the archbishop that is the first among equals for their own thing. So this is divided the church, and ironically, it's meant that now the ones that will be under the Archbishop of Canterbury are going to be the minority of Anglicans, and the majority are part of this much more conservative church that is largely centered on the countries that were once colonies of England. And I hope I got that right. You can correct me if I.
No, that's the essence of it. And the announcement, the thing that is remarkable in the announcement was that they weren't even saying we're breaking away. They didn't say we're breaking away and we're forming a new communion. They said we are taking charge of the communion.
That's right.
So it's the same body, but we are taking charge of it, which is a heck of a statement, right? It actually has precedence, because when Henry VIII declared the English church to be autonomous, he wasn't arguing on the basis of we're going to break away and do something new. He was arguing on the basis of this is the church in England, and we continue as we have always been. And it is you who have moved away, in a sense, right? I mean, his argument was actually.
And that is absolutely GAFCON's position, right? Is that the church in England has moved away from the purity of the scripture, right?
And I mean, the irony, of course, is that Henry VIII had just previously written a staunch defense of the papacy against the Reformation on the continent. He was defender of the faith. A title that Charles III still wears, whether he is or not. A title he still wears. Someone there, typical Anglicans copying Catholics years later, got their own set of Sedevacantists.
Yeah, they do. They have their own. Except Driving and Dragons should be jealous, because the Sedevacantists of the Anglican communion number in the millions.
Yes, I will. My favorite Sedevacantist will always be Pope Michael. God bless that man. He was the character. The Sedevacantist that the mainline Roman Catholics pointed to when they wanted to mock the idea. Because God bless him, he was loony. But a gentle and lovely kind of loony.
Okay, so my question to you is, how do you justify 1 Timothy 2:12 to the fact that you're getting a pro-abortionist, pro-gay, pro-mass migration woman to be the head of your church? I know it's a tough one.
No, I'm itching my ears. I've got itching ears. You know what? I don't.
Just for again, because some of our viewers might be heathens. 1 Timothy 2:12 says, "But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." It's basically the prohibition on woman preachers.
Yes. The Anglican Church in Canada and the Episcopal Church in the U.S. and indeed the English the Church of England have long had women's ordination. This is not a topic with which I have any enormous problem. I think the theology on it was relatively well done beforehand, unlike some of the things that have come along later. Some of the things even that I don't have issues with as changes in doctrine so much, but that there was never any theological groundwork done for them. And the theological groundwork in women's ordination was, in its simplistic terms, came down to that which is not assumed is not saved, because so much of the justification rested on Christ as male, and as Christ was male, the priesthood must be male.
That isn't really implicit in 1 Timothy 2:12. Anyway.
No, it's not. No, it's not implicit in 1 Timothy. But a lot of the argument had been along those lines. And this is not an issue I have. I do have an issue with changes.
But you can see how somebody who is, ironically, in the 19th century, right, the English went all over the world and converted millions of people to Christianity. Mm-hmm. And they told them, this is the inerrant word of God, right? So
you can entirely see where they've got where they got the position.
Or whatever. It's
not
God, right? So
how do you
overrule that,
Yeah, well, this is why, for me, if you haven't actually done any theology, if you haven't actually wrestled with a question, if you haven't actually dealt with the text and dealt with the tradition, if you haven't done the work, then you're really just introducing things you want to introduce. You're just like, well, I don't like that, so I'm going to do it, right? Yeah. So
I do know some of the arguments over the years that have been made against that particular verse, right? So there is the suggestion that this was something specific or unique to Ephesus, perhaps, because of course Ephesus, for those of you who aren't aware, was the site of the great temple of Artemis of Ephesus, right? That was one of the wonders of the ancient world, right? And so one of the common arguments that comes there is that, well, Timothy was bishop of Ephesus, and this was a problem because maybe in Ephesus the women priests had the pagan women priests of Artemis had all this authority, and there was that made the women particularly uppity or something like that, right? But but that's actually not historically true, because when the temple, the actual temple of Ephesus that became the wonder of the world was built, it was built after a fire had destroyed the previous temple. Like we know that in the early part, like we're talking about from like the 8th century BC until the 3rd century BC, if I'm remembering correctly, there you had a female priesthood. But after that, what you have is that the female priesthood in Ephesus was itself usurped by a priesthood of male eunuchs that they held all the actual power. The women, there were still women priests of Artemis, but they didn't really have any political or religious power. It was these eunuch males that did, right? So it because of the Greek chauvinism that had come in after Alexander the Great, right? Where the Greeks were famously misogynist, if you want to say, right? There were no powerful women preachers of Artemis, and by the time that First Timothy was written, right? Yeah. So that doesn't really fall in, and like that. After that, you get other arguments that, well, Timothy might not even be a legitimate book, right? Like we don't know who really wrote it. That's the sort of shit that the Jesus Seminar comes up with, right?
Right. Yeah.
But it's still there, right? Like I've yet to see a way that you can make a serious argument that, besides simply saying, well, it's only a product of its time. But if that's only a product of its time, then how much else of the New Testament is a product of its time? You can say,
discerning
has been replaced by Christianity, right? Which is a Christian argument. But you can't say that about the New Testament, because if you do, then nothing is valid, right?
Right.
Anything can be taken as mere suggestion.
Yeah, and discerning that kind of thing is not like, it's not something you do flippantly.
Yeah.
Discerning that kind of thing is not the kind of thing that you engage in to score political points, right?
Yeah. And I mean, that's largely why it happened, right? It's just because the feminist movement demanded it and the Anglicans did it, right? Like, it's not anything else. I'm sorry if I'm putting you in the hot seat here, right?
Don't worry about it.
Given that this is very recent news that has happened in the Anglican Communion, I couldn't help but look into this, right? And bring it up, right?
Well, I have to say, in terms of the new the appointed Archbishop of Canterbury, I think her sex is probably the least problematic situation. How's that?
Well, yeah, we've got a lot of other issues.
So that's probably as much thought as I've bothered to give to it.
And I would add that the part I think that a lot of people in this discussion miss when it comes to that chapter of First Timothy, to chapter 2 of First Timothy, is the last verse there, where it says, "Notwithstanding, she shall be saved in childbearing, and if they continue in faith and charity and holiness with sobriety," right? Which to a lot of people in the modern age, they'll look at that and like, "Oh yeah, well, see, they just thought women were for making babies, right?" But that is a complete, completely how do you say, childish view of what that is saying, right? Because if you look at after that, the history of Christianity, women were crucial to the spread of Christianity, starting with Constantine, right? His mom was the reason he became a Christian. Ultimately,
Augustine's mother too.
Bridge, all of that, right? But it was in real sense, the seed of his Christianity came from his mother, right? And afterwards, in the expanse of Christianity in Europe, there are countless cases of rulers, chieftains or kings or dukes or whatever they were, that were pagan, that end up getting into a political marriage with some Christian monarch who gives them their one of his daughters to marry. And then either, like this is what happened with Mieszko in Poland, right? He married a Christian and then he becomes a Christian, right? And in other cases, maybe the guy doesn't, but his kid is going to be Christian because his mom raised him, right?
Yeah.
And this is part of this concept of, I think in Christianity, there is a concept that's not much talked about today, but it's the idea of the woman as the mother is the protector of the present and the creator of the future, right? Like as the mother directs the child, that will determine more than most priests will ever determine who becomes Christian, right? Like that. So I think that what Timothy meant there, I mean, I am not a minister myself, but this is my interpretation of it, is that he's saying that the role of the woman is actually a more important role in the process of that she will be the one that ensures the preservation of the faith, and and the proof of that we have in the 20th century as feminism developed and was essentially in many ways very opposed to traditional Christianity. It saw a decay in religiosity,
Yes.
That's
well, it's a decay in religiosity and also a decline in birth rates.
Yeah, of course, yeah, because women wanted to deny the role of mother, as they wanted to treat that as if it was something oppressive, rather than like the central biological urge of every woman. And that the proof of that is that over the last 50 years, the level of happiness that men have has not particularly changed, but the level of happiness that women have in every psychological study is just cratered, right? And it's because they've been trained to go against their biological imperative, which is not to say that all women have to be moms or that's the only thing they can be, right? But it's a sign of the damage that the abandonment of these traditional values have created, all right. Anyways, I don't want to have you on the sweat box any further on that. But I did have another religious topic, one that isn't specifically Anglican, that might be of interest to discuss here. So, recently Donald Trump was talking about religion, and he was saying, like when they did this deal just now in Israel, he was saying, well, he hopes that all of this, he's doing all this peacemaking. He's been very proud about how he's been trying to stop wars in different places in the world, conflicts and things like that. And he said in an interview, or when he was when an oppressor, that that he kind of hopes that this will get him into heaven, but he doesn't really think he's going to go to heaven, right?
Yeah.
And incredibly, a large number of North American, let's say, Christians, jumped a very kind of negative way, right? Like they were like, oh, he doesn't understand Christianity and this sort of thing, right? Like this proves it, like that. And like, to me, that is one of the most Christian things you can say, right? Because like this notion, like, first of all, okay, so he was, I'm pretty sure he's not that well versed in the debate between salvation by works and salvation by faith, right? But I do think that what he's saying there is that he recognizes that he's a sinner, right? and that he isn't deserving of salvation in and of himself, right? But he's trying to do good in the world, and he is, like, this is actually, to me, and certainly something I think for myself, right? That I've when you're young, you don't think about these things, but when you get to our age, at least, I think if you're a thinking person, you come to realize just how unbelievably flawed you are as a human being, right? And how undeserving you are of almost anything that you've got, right? To say nothing of eternity, right? And this idea of a world that is a perfection of the perfect state, right? How could you be that, right? When you are obviously corrupt, right? And that's the kind of the secret of the formula of Christian salvation, right? Is that you're not the one that gets yourself into heaven, right? But and one of the things you have to recognize to be able to get into heaven is your own inherent unworthiness of going to heaven, right? Like we are unworthy in the sight of the Lord, and yet still the adopted children of His mercy. Like, so I thought that was like probably the most religious thing Trump ever said.
My line has long been, I firmly believe that Christ died to save sinners. I have trouble believing that He died to save me. I can believe that He died to save you. I believe He died to save you, but not me. And I think
what's interesting is that in the first 9 verses, in the first 8 verses of 1 Timothy chapter 2, it's actually about that subject, right? He calls for the Christians to make supplications, prayers, intercessions, and the giving of thanks for all men, for kings and all that are in authority, for a peaceful life and godliness and honesty, but that it is good and acceptable in the sight of God our Savior, that He wills that all men should be saved who come into knowledge of the truth, right? And that's, essentially He's saying, you shouldn't just pray for yourself. You shouldn't just pray for the people in your parish. You should pray for everyone, right? And that is that is actually that message, right? Of the capacity for that God fundamentally wants everyone to be saved, right? And obviously you can't get there alone, like.
I think that the two things about that statement, one of which is it goes entirely counter to type. I mean, you would expect him to say, I'm going to go to heaven. It'll be the best heaven. It'll be the heaven above the heaven. It'll be in the exclusive club. I'll be in with St. Michael and all the angels.
I think that what happened is that the assassination attempt on him.
Yeah.
You don't go through something like that without doing some serious thinking, right? And since then, he's had a much more self-deprecating style than he ever did before, right?
So
he's been able to make a bit of mockery of himself. More than he ever did before.
It's so not the statement you'd expect him to make. But we all we all know ourselves better than we know anyone else, right? Like, of all the people you know, everyone is a mystery. We are mysteries to ourselves. Like, I don't understand myself half the time.
That's why the temple at Delphi said, know thyself,
But I know myself better than anyone else. It may not be complete. And there's corners of my psyche, there's corners of my heart that I don't even understand. But I do know it better than I know anyone else. And better than anyone else knows me. And so when you think of other people's sinfulness, what you're seeing is the outward act. You're seeing how it surfaces. When you think of your own sin, the outward act comes second, and the first thing you see is the corruption, because you know it. It's in you. And so that's why I think it is harder for a lot of people. And I said, when I made that comment, that literally is kind of how I understand salvation, how I've long thought about it, that I can accept that Christ died for the world. I have trouble accepting that I'm part of that world, right? Because I know my own heart, and I know my own issues. And if we're honest, generally speaking, when narcissists aside, we're the hardest critic of our own lives, our own actions, of our own hearts, right? We're the ones who hold ourselves to the fire the most. And then what happens is if we then run away from that in our own soul, if we won't deal with that, if we won't...
A lot of people react to that by going into denial, right?
Yeah, and you run away from it, and you skirt around it, and you don't deal with it out of cowardness, out of legitimate fear. It's a frightening place to be. You end up living a sort of... Well, you end up living like the Soviet Union, where the only thing you know for sure is that everyone's lying to you, right? And everything you hear, it's a lie, and they know it's a lie, but you just all agree to ignore the lie. So you just sort of agree with yourself. You just have to agree to ignore the fact that you've got major work to do, because you wouldn't get out of bed in the morning if you kept dealing with it every day. If you looked at that every day, you wouldn't get out of bed. So you just, you kind of set it aside. But that is the entire reason for Christ. That's the whole point of the redemption, is that we can't dig ourselves out of it. We're all in the same boat, and we're all sinking, and none of us can swim. And that's why God becomes incarnate. There's no other reason for it. It's not to deliver some life lessons. He could do that with angels. He could do that by writing it in fire in the sky. He doesn't need to become human unless it is to grab hold of humanity and say, okay, you can't swim this. You can't save this ship. I'm going to do it. Right. And it is only the realization of your own limitations, your own frailty, your own corruption, which will, as C.S. Lewis puts it, Christianity tells people they are saved. It has very little to say to people who think they don't need saving. I'm paraphrasing, I'm sure there, but so yeah, it has to be a deep realization. I mean, even St. Paul, I don't do what I would do. I do what I would not do. There's no health in me, I'm a miserable sinner that I am, So a realization of one's own brokenness, one's own sinfulness is a healthy place to be. Was he playing with people? I mean, because he's also...
I don't think so. I mean, like, because if said, if he just said the first line, right? I hope that this will get me into heaven. Then
yeah.
He went and said, no, I don't think because I've done some bad things.
Yeah,
he said,
yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That is a statement of shocking level of truth by
probably the most profound thing he's ever said, I would say.
What is the last politician you can think of that that made that kind of a confession. You know?
Well, I mean, this is what's always struck me when you get into the sort of the sorry, it's been a long day. The rapture talk, right? Everyone who talks about it, they're buying rapture insurance because they're pretty sure they're going to be taken.
Yeah.
I've never heard someone talk about the rapture who believes that who thinks that they're going to be one of the ones left behind. Right? It's all, well, what will the people around me? How will I arrange life so my dog gets fed after I've been raptured? It's never, well, I guess I'll have to watch the neighbor's dog because he'll be raptured, and I've got to go over there and feed his dog for him. You know, it's always the assumption that, well, of course, we're among the elect, so we're going to go. You're all in trouble, but you know.
From Robert Satin, great stream episode. Thank you both.
Oh, thank you,
appreciate that. That's very nice. Yeah, I mean, you know, like I have a very, I am not a member of any denomination, right? And part of the, you know, one of the problems of being an academic of religion is that it makes it very difficult to buy in the whole hog to any denomination of any kind, right?
Right.
And you know, I've studied and admire a great number of world religions to the point that I would still say I am in many ways a universalist, right? Michael, not as in Unitarian Universalist, right? Not those guys. They're just weirdos. Michael McLaughlin says, "Where in theology is the rapture ever from?" Well, it's not really in theology.
No, St. Paul says, you know, that St. Paul says, you know, we will, you know, we'll be in an instant we'll be taken up with Christ in the air, you know. And some will be taken and some will be left, but it's, you know.
But what is constantly repeated in both Old and New Testament is no one will know the hour. So all these guys have like the whole deal of like you know, it's just ridiculous.
Well, that's the thing. I know the time and the day. Read my book to find out when it'll happen. Exactly. You know, it'll go on sale the day after.
Just like it took off like crazy in the 70s with evangelical.
Oh, it was before that though. It was before that. There were things.
I mean, like the guy that came up with the whole rapture thing was quite a bit earlier.
Yeah.
But
but I mean, in terms of predicting,
popularized in our lifetime in that time period. You know, like that. It became, because before that, you know, like it was something that only very particular denominations bought into, right?
Yeah. But there was always cranks who'd come up every once in a while and raise a little popular movement. Yeah. I mean, even, you know, back in the 1800s, and you know,
prediction of the end of the world is a favorite thing, you know, all the way back. In the time of baptism of fire, right? They thought that in 30 the world was going to end. You know?
Well, and monks in northern Scotland, as the Vikings came sweeping through, you know, well, this is it, you know, I guess this is the end. Yeah.
Every generation believes they're in the end times, you know. But I was saying, you know, like I have a very universalist view of religion. I certainly believe that there is a true and living God Most High, right? That there's a supreme being. I have a very complicated relationship to Jesus. Let's put it that way, right? Like I recognize, because it's very easy when you become an academic to recognize the kind of the cosmological concept of it, right? Like there's similarities to it in all kind of, including in Judaism, right? Like Jesus, like there's the manifestation of the middle point of the tree of life is the representation of the Christ, right? I have a tremendous admiration for the entire Bible, but I'm not really, like, I don't know if the level at which I recognize the significance of the Christ in that role as Redeemer is enough, because it is a lot of where I get it from is an intellectual perception, right? It's not like, you know, because you got you have to have a personal relationship with Jesus, right? I don't know if I can say that I have a personal relationship with Jesus, you know. So I I am very uncertain about whether that is going to be sufficient or not.
Well, maybe you have a public relationship with Jesus then.
Well, I try, yeah,
Sure.
to certain degrees, but I would also say that, but I'm sure that by a lot of Christian denominations, I would be seen at least as a heretic. So I'm really not sure how that's going to go for me. But it's still time. You never know. And I've become. I mean, I was raised in a Catholic family, and then I too became basically an atheist in my teenage years. And then when I got into I was studying history, and I became fascinated by the history of religion. Mm-hmm. And at that point, I got I stopped being an atheist almost immediately. But like I said, I've been looking at world religions of all different kinds, and I see not only commonalities but elements of each one that has real truth to it, right? So it's. I don't know if I can really undo that, right? Or in any significant way and say, no, I'm just this, right? Like, but
right.
Ironically, from the point of view of certain people that are not very keen on it, the thing that brought me back to a much more connected perspective on of biblical religion was the fact that about what was it now? It's been 22 years now. 22 years ago, I became a Freemason, right?
Yeah.
And Freemasonry it's got a pretty good rap in the Anglican Church because it's a British institution. But and there have been several archbishops of Canterbury who were Freemasons. Mm-hmm. Certainly, this one won't be, but but in a lot of other Christian religions, it's looked at with a lot of dubiousness, specifically because it is a universalist religion, right? To become a Freemason, you cannot be an atheist, and you have to recognize the existence of a supreme being that has what is it called? That encourages virtue and condemns vice, right? But you can be any religion. Right? You could be Jewish. You could be Muslim. You could be most branches of Hinduism that believe in the Atman, in a central Godhead. You can't be a Mahayana Buddhist because they believe in nothingness, basically. But if you believe in a all-encompassing deity that has consciousness, right, and that is the source of human virtue, then you can become a Mason, right? But all the ritual of Masonry comes out of the Christian tradition.
Yeah, that's right. So the church,
mainly the Temple of Solomon and all of that, right? So when I joined Freemasonry, I began to see that in a whole different light, and since then it has only brought me consistently over the last couple of decades closer towards the place that I started from. Mm-hmm. Oh, Brendan Davis is here. He's the publisher of one of my earliest RPGs, Arrows of Indra, which is Dungeons and Dragons set in the world of epic India during the Mahabharata, right? Where I made use of all of my knowledge of Hinduism to make that game. He says, I grew up in an Anglican church because my mom was Catholic and my father was not. It was a kind of compromise, okay? Well, I mean, Anglicanism and Catholicism, somebody said, I think the dungeon, because some people came in late, they didn't know what denomination you were in. They said, I think he's a Protestant. And I said, well, he's Anglican, so he's barely a Protestant.
We are, you know what? I mean, and the church that I because I was brought up, in my mother's side of the family was Lutheran. My father's side of the family was Methodist, Congregationalist Methodist.
So you did come from a Reformation background.
Yeah, and but I ditched it all at one point, and I moved in to an apartment across from the Episcopal Cathedral in Milwaukee, which is as nosebleed high as you get. Their liturgy, their theology, their Mariology. You'll hear the Blessed Virgin Mary spoken of more there than at the Vatican, kind of thing. It's hardcore, and it was that that rich Catholicity that grabbed me. It just had not been present in any of the church experience I'd had growing up, and there was no meat.
Is basically Catholic, yeah.
Yeah, there was no meat on the bones, as it were, right? And there is a rich intellectual tradition in Protestantism, but it is very much that. It is very much an intellectual tradition. It's a very rationalized thing,
which is why I associate a bit more with Protestantism than I do with my upbringing as a Catholic, right? Because Catholicism is all ritual and nobody tells you to read the Bible, whereas with Protestantism, it's sola scriptura, right?
But if this was the thing, this was a faith that grabbed onto the mystery. It grabbed onto the things that
it's those two sides
in plain light.
On either side, they most denominations will tend to err to one direction or the other. That it's either
I would say
the beautiful, mysterious elements, or the devotion to Scripture.
The rational and But I would even say that done what I would call right. Anglicanism actually says actually is more invested in mystery than Roman Catholicism. Roman Catholicism, and Roman Catholicism, even in the pre-Vatican II, had a need to define. It is at this moment when the bread becomes the body. It is at this moment when the wine becomes the blood. The priest is to hold his hands like this. It is to be a certain distance apart. There was a measurement on where you should hold your hands. It was very defined. And Anglicanism has always shared with Orthodoxy a sense of, I don't know. We know that it is. We had no idea how. And it to me was it's a slight puckishness in the Anglican tradition, and it's historically that is playful around the edges. Now that vanishes pretty entirely during the reign of Cromwell, but it comes roaring back and has remained there. And it is the Anglican Church that produced Dame Julian Norwich, right? And the wonderfully evocative and strange images. It was the English Church. It was pre-Reformation, but it is the English Church that generates that kind of strange and wonderful playfulness around theology.
It goes back to Tertullian, doesn't it? I believe, because it is absurd.
Yes, and it's a strain which is, I think, present in all Christian denominations, probably, to be honest, in all faiths. The capacity to say, my understanding goes this far, but I know there's something past it. I can see this far into the dark, and it is the and then which attracts. It is the and then which invites. It's the and then which draws me in, which, to bring this back to gaming, is what the soul of adventure in D&D is to me. And that light is the 30-foot radius from a torch, and I can see, but what's past that? I want to find out, and I will find things there that terrify me, and I will fight them, and I will find things there which will reward me, and I will hoard them up, like a great treasure, which I will then bury in a field, right? Because this is worth so much. There's this sense of not only the luminous, the light that penetrates and illuminates and that gives life, but also the sense of the shadow, which intrigues and promises a depth, we're talking about like, the long dark night of the soul, the capacity to go into the dark and to go into the unknown, which is why, I mean, in Catholic, and I small c Catholic, because you can be Catholic and Anglican, you can be Catholic and Lutheran, you could be, the small c Catholic, the ritual of that kind of liturgy is designed to tell you can see a bit, but you can't see it all. None of us can. That's the purpose of incense, for instance, right?
Yeah.
You put up this, first of all, you're burning the incense as a pleasing odor. You're burning an incense because someone important is visiting. It was burned in homes to get rid of the smell of a bunch of people living in a place, right? And so when someone important comes over, you burn the incense. But it also obscures your vision. I did my internship at St. Bartholomew's in Regent Park in Toronto, and it was a small church. It's no bigger than the church I'm in now, which is a very small, building. They would use so much incense. And the quip was, if you can see the altar from the back pew, they haven't used enough incense.
Yeah.
And it was these great clouds, and it obscures the vision. It's like you can't see through you can't see through the veil of mystery here. And the Orthodox, of course, they do it brilliantly. They do iconostasis, and they're behind this. What you can't see anything that's going on, right? They're way back.
Part of the formula of religious practice is that you're in the periphery. You're trying to get to the center, and the center is perfection. But and you will. The goal is to keep attempting it constantly, knowing that you're never going to get to that center, right? To that state, at least not in this lifetime, right? So but you nevertheless continue to always keep trying to progress to that point,
Yeah, and you're invited into the mystery. Yeah. And ultimately, it has to be mystery, because the soul of Christianity is relationship, right? It isn't a set of rules for life. It isn't a set of ritual practices. There are rules, there are ritual practices, but those are surrounding to help you find what is ultimately the point, which is a relationship with a person. Yeah. And relationship is inherently mysterious, right? I mean, I was saying earlier, we don't understand each other. We don't even understand ourselves. Like, you could be married for 50 years and your spouse is going to do things that surprise you. They're going to do things that, like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And if that is true of our human relationships, how much more our relationship with God, who's so much deeper and broader and taller and greater than anything, sorry, the train's going by. You're going to get a train blast for a little bit. That relationship is by necessity. All right. The conductor's, the engineer, rather, his ex-wife lives in town. I'm pretty sure of that. You are going to get so much more profound mystery, because you're not dealing with a human being, right? I mean, in the incarnation, God took on humanity in order to be known, but that was, what we saw and perceived of Christ was the tip of the iceberg, right? There's unfathomable depths that must have been, must have been deeply impressive to encounter, to meet Christ in the incarnate, life must have been. It's why he could walk up to a tax collector and say, "Follow me," and the guy's like, "Okay," like, I've got a job, I've got status, I've got money, and I'll follow you.
The other side of that story, though, is that Jesus was God incarnate on earth, and the vast majority of the people that were around him did not react in that way, right? Like, it was only
a number didn't,
who had some kind of a quality that was not usually because they were like super virtuous people or something like that, right? On the contrary, right?
No.
That it was people that were in some form of need.
Again, who recognize their need for salvation.
Yeah.
I think that the people who rejected Jesus likely encountered that profundity, that depth, that power, but they were afraid of it, as you would be. It terrified, especially if it threatens
several instances
you.
that say so in the gospel.
And to especially when it's someone who is threatening the world you've built, the identity you've built, the your role, your position, your importance, your power is gonna have to evaporate, which is why the centurion who comes to him, is why the leader of the synagogue who comes to him, these are the impressive characters. Like, that's why a tax collector going to him is an impressive move, because Matthew had everything to lose, right? And it was only his capacity to pick up that there was something to gain that gets him up from the tax booth. Peter, by all biblical accounts, was a garbage fisherman. Like he didn't, he couldn't catch anything without direct divine intervention. So maybe Peter, it was easier for him to walk away. Like, I've been fishing and I haven't caught a thing. We don't see us other than when Jesus tells him where to throw the net. He didn't catch anything, but maybe his life was easier to walk away from. Who knows, but yeah, that must have been an encounter. That must have been something.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We've got some comments here that I wanted to bring up. So Mr. Max says, can you be neo-pagan? I think that's in reference to being a Freemason. The jury's a bit out on that, but you'd have to be able to have a conception of a supreme being, right? So it would kind of depend, right? Like, for example, most Hindu denominations have this idea of Brahma or the Atman being the actual, the fullest manifestation of the Godhead, and all of the other ones are just facets of a deity. So that counts as a supreme being, right? And a lot of modern day neo-paganism doesn't really do that. They kind of do the Dungeons and Dragons take, right, where they're all just different people, the neo-pagan gods. Then Mac Thompson says, my priests say read scripture daily. Well, I don't know. I went to a lot of masses as a kid, and I never heard that.
I will say that the Roman Catholic Church has gotten far more serious about scripture.
Could be, yeah.
And someone was quipping that essentially the Roman Catholic Church has reformed every single one of the things that Luther was complaining about. Like, everything has been
pretty much, yeah.
So what's going on, Lutherans? Why are you not? But of course they've got a few hundred years of tradition of their own that they've built up. But yeah.
So we've got here, Drew Ender says, RPG Pundit plus guest, you emphasize saints having certain domains or doing deeds in your campaign, and so can you share some of your favorite or most interesting ones? Well, in my games, which are medieval authentic, I have in one of the source books for baptism required, which is 101 Sarmatians, which is mostly to do with the noble caste in Polish, the Polish nobility.
That title is brilliant.
I know, it's wonderful, isn't it? In the appendix of the book, I have here the cult of the saints, which presents a list of what were the most popular Christian saints at the time of the setting, and mechanics by which anyone, but especially holy men, can invoke the assistance of the saints in their respective patronage, right? So you could invoke Saint Benedict against poison and things like that, and I have a version of it that was for Lion and Dragon, which is reprinted in the Old School Companion. So I literally have rules for praying to saints in my games. And there's also an adventure that has been published as one of the Pundit files, which you can find. It's my PDF periodical series in the Red Room store. That is, it's called. Oh geez, I'm drawing a blank here. Just a sec. It's called the. Oh my God, I didn't write this that long ago. You'd think I'd remember. Jeez, where is it? The Bones of Saint Florian. That's right, which is a quest, a type adventure that is basically about the player characters receive a vision, either if they have a holy man character or some NPC holy man gives them a vision of the lost bones of a Christian saint that they then have to go and rescue, basically.
Right.
So yeah, there are definitely, in my medieval authentic games, there's definitely saints. Yeah.
No, and they have patronages. But for me, the saints are definitely patrons of particular occupations and are invoked for particular situations. Individual churches will be dedicated to a saint, but they may have statues of other saints in them. They're not exclusive. It's not like the sort of D&D pantheon system where I am a cleric of this god and only this god. The cleric will be a follower of a particular saint, but it isn't the saint. Really, they're not actually followers of the saint. They're in the school of the saint. They're students of the saint, but they are followers of. They are worshiping the god. This unknown god. But because of that remove, because there's not an incarnate god to relate to more intimately, and because this god is very much unknown, the saints take a central spot in order to have someone to know, and they're looked up to like big brothers and sisters who have. They've already taken their driver's test. They can tell you what to expect. They've already been to high school. They can tell you what it's going to be like. So it's more about that. But they do have specific patronages is probably the wrong term. Things for which they are invoked. So Saint Brendan invoked by sailors. St. Cuthbert invoked before battle, especially by clerics. And so there's things like that, but they don't necessarily have domains in the way like, Thor, the god of thunder and crops, and, Loki, the god of chaos. And they don't have like silos like that so much.
Yeah. Driving Drive says it's about $3.50. Yeah, you can go if you want to check out my Pundit Files series. We're now on, I think, number 39 of the Pundit Files. So there's 39 different periodicals that each have a different subject, right? And you can get any of them by going to the Red Room store. The link is in the description of this live stream or any of my videos. There's links to all of my books in the if you expand the description, and those ones, they each cost $3.50, right? So if you can get $3.50, you can get an issue of the Pundit Files. I was gonna say to the remaining audience now that the big news is that I've been writing in the Pundit Files a series on a setting for my space opera game, Star Adventurer. But I was approached by a publisher that wants to actually publish it all together as a book. So sometime, probably early next year, you're going to see that setting, which is called Sons of Heaven. That will be it'll be produced as a full RPG, so it's going to have rules that were originally based on Star Adventurer, which you can already get. Star Adventure is just a set of rules for running space opera. No, it's not the space opera, the RPG. It's a book I made. It's a gold bestseller on drive-thru. It's called Star Adventure, which is it's one of my smallest books. It's only like 34 pages long, but it's a complete RPG for running space opera, but it doesn't have a setting to it, right? It's just OSR rules for space opera gaming, right? And this time it's going to be remade in the particular setting of Sons of Heaven, which I've described in the past as being like the sci-fi version of the Bronze Age collapse, right? But it also has, speaking of religion, it has a lot of it takes a lot of religious inspiration from the book of Judges and Samuel, and it's humanity has been laid low by a cataclysm, and now you're trying to rebuild it and also find the chosen person who is going to be the one that restores the kingdom, basically. So it's
a contemporary. It's a contemporary story.
Sort of, yeah. Well, it's actually set like 20,000 years in the future, but yeah, it is in a way.
It could be set tomorrow.
Yeah. All right. So, here's a question. Have any of you put any of your settings or dimensions? Well, I certainly have, Max. So if you, like I said, if you expand the description of this video, I mean, unless I forgot to do it, but I'm pretty sure I've got it here. So if you go like where it says, how many are watching now, if you click to expand that, you're going to see links. First of all, you're going to see a link to the Dungeon Minister's YouTube. So if you haven't been there yet, you can check it out and subscribe. But then you'll see like every single book I've ever gotten and published either in print or PDF, that you can have a link to finding them, right? Including all my medieval authentic games.
As far as me, no, I have not. The furthest I've gone on that, actually, patrons have access to some stuff, and I haven't been very good at uploading as much as I should have, and partly it's because so many of my adventures are scribbled on the back of a piece of paper, and there's no form or anything to it. So making them digital has been a pain in the butt. Patrons have access to a lot of those files, and occasionally I'll put something on Patreon for people, including like I did a whole rundown of a handful of saints and some of the prior faiths in my world, and I did it because Wizard, who was on here earlier, Mr. James Keck, how's that telescope going there, James? But Wizard he's playing a cleric in my campaign, the game shop campaign that doesn't happen at the game shop anymore, and he was asking about about the faith, and so because none of my my home game players are clerics, there was never any real reason to develop it in depth. I didn't need to have a real gritty, crunchy, but Wizard wanted to know, so I put together a document of the stuff that was floating around in my head that I just never put down. So that's about it. That's probably the most formal thing I've done yet. My boys have done, like kids do, drawings of things, and we've got an ongoing project that I promise will actually get completed one day, probably when they're in their 30s and no longer interested. But where they bring me a drawing of some crazy monster, and I have to make up stats for it, right? And so it's going, rather than inventing a monster and then commissioning art for it, I'm getting art and trying to go, what is this? Yeah, going the other way. So
well, that happened with Gary Gygax. Also, he had these little weird plastic monster
dinosaurs.
Yeah, and
the Chinosaurs.
He ended up inventing things like the Rust Monster and that sort of thing from those.
Yeah. So that would be the other thing. But those aren't really for my campaign. They're just things the kids have come up with. A couple of them have worked their way into the campaign, like the paper golem that my youngest Bob Johnny came up with. He made it out of clay. He made this little thing. And then he invented the rules for it, that this paper golem, if you attack it with an edged weapon, it just cuts in half. It just cuts it, and it creates a second golem. And so instead of one big one, now you have two smaller ones attacking you. And of course, it's extremely vulnerable to fire. But once it's on fire, it then tries to hug you. It tries to grab onto you as it flames out and injure you that way. So that was fun because it disguises itself as just papers on the floor. So they walked into an old cabin, and there were papers all over the floor. And they thought, oh, there's nothing in here. Let's start looking through the papers. And the papers start to swirl, and they get up, and that was fun. Most of them, though, are things that have never appeared in the campaign.
Well, I think we're getting to the end of the interview here, and we also have a traditional final question.
Yeah.
So to put it into context, right? One of the things that's kind of curious about me is that I have very few like pop culture nerdy pursuits, right? I don't watch anime. I don't cosplay. I don't own Funko Pops. I don't play Magic the Gathering. I don't play any kind of like weird German board games.
Ditto here. I don't do those. I don't do video games. I mean, Myst was the only video game I ever really got into.
Yeah, I don't play any video games. Yeah, and like all that sort of thing, right? Like I might watch, a Marvel movie or something, but that's really mainstream at this point, right? It's not really something nerdy as such. So the question, basically, it's a contest, and the current champion is Driving in Dragons, who was on this one of the earlier episodes of the Pundit Encounter, and has so far been the reigning champion. The question is basically, how nerdy are you, right? Aside from Dungeons and Dragons, is there any other nerdy thing that you do?
Well, I mean, probably not terribly. Like I said, I don't do video games, and I read comic books when I was a kid.
Yeah, of course, I read comic books. But everybody read comic books.
Yeah, that's not being nerdy. That's being a kid. I played Star Wars as a kid.
I don't read Forgotten Realms novels or any other kind of like fantasy fiction.
No. I will read another YouTuber, Lightmane, sent me Zelazny's Amber Chronicles.
That is a great series. I read it.
It's fantasy literature, but it's not Forgotten Realms or Dragonlance or whatever. It's not part of a whole. I guess it is part of a series, but I don't. I'm not into Magic the Gathering, or I don't. I mean, Marvel movies. I watched a few of them. I've seen most of the Marvel movies. I've seen as clips on YouTube. Not a lot, right?
This is a tough call, right? Because you're
but I'm a priest.
Yeah, you have a very serious profession, is what I was going to say, and
it's kind of a dorky profession.
You're not into any other nerdy stuff. Now, Driving the Dragon,
I don't collect swords.
He's won so far because he only plays RPGs. He doesn't do any other nerdy stuff.
No.
And in his spare time, he shoots guns and fixes automobiles. Right. So that's
I do
anti-nerd stuff.
I do neither of. Well, I can replace headlights, change air filters. That's the level of car repair I get into. The rest of it, I if it were 40 years ago, maybe, but now, gosh, no way. There's no way. I look inside the car. I don't even, which one is the engine? I don't know, because everything's so weird now under the hood. I don't. I mean, I do jigsaw puzzles. That's not really nerdy. That's like an old man.
Driving a Dragon. He loses into instantly died Catholic, can't beat Catholic. Yeah, well, that's a good question because he's an ardent sedevacantist. He doesn't recognize the current Bishop of Rome. So I don't know if that's like a more nerdy version of Catholicism or a less nerdy version of Catholicism.
That's a more nerdy version of Catholicism by far, because you have to really, really care about the apostolic succession and some fine points of theology to even go there. So it's anyone who cares
But it is also
that
a much
deeply
more,
about minutia is, you know,
it is a more hardcore version of the religion. You could say.
it tends to be more hardcore, but even that is nerdy. Like I can tell you from Anglican circles, high Anglicans, I mean, we really care about, you know, the difference between a surplice and a cotta. We, you know, we care about what the liturgical color is, and which liturgical color is that Guatemalan stole with every color of the rainbow in it. You know, like which one are you nailing there? You know, we get into that kind of stuff. That's pretty nerdy, I have to say. That's pretty nerdy.
Yeah, it's a tough call. It's a tough call, but
It is.
you know,
I would call myself nerdy just because I don't know what other category I'd fit in. Like average Joe, maybe, like, but you know, I got a dog that I take for WALKs, so I'm not going to say the word because he's right under my feet. You know, I watch YouTube videos and do jigsaw puzzles and play D&D. You know,
well, it's stunningly close, I'd say.
But I don't shoot guns. That really pulls you, you know.
Yeah. I think that might be the determining factor. I think that Driving and Dragons wins by a hair.
I think so. Now, if you can identify guns but never shoot them, that's very nerdy.
Being dethroned, you know, like you almost it's almost there, right? But yeah, almost everybody else who's been given this test question has failed to different degrees in terms of other, you know, like a lot of people play video games. Yeah, a lot of grown men spend their time playing video games.
Yeah, well, James is absolutely. I paint minis and I create my own terrain. I mean, that's still in the RPG hobby field, but that is, I mean,
yeah, that is true. But it is a side gig of the RPG hobby. And like, for example, I don't use miniatures at all. I do theater of the mind.
It's taking
Driving and Dragons. Do you if you're still around, do you paint miniatures or make your own terrain?
That's a question.
We'll see if he's still here.
Metal Yellow Fist Red. Yeah.
Because I think I would put it that if you collect miniatures, that makes you slightly more nerdy.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty dorky. Yeah. But is there a difference between nerdy and dorky? How about if you make your own miniatures?
I'm as aggressively theater of the mind as I'm saying. Well, that might be a personal bias of mine, but I think that gives him an extra point on top of that. So there you go, because I am not a minis guy.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Almost hit 3 hours, which makes you, I think, probably like the second longest that I've ever done. The longest was John Delaros, which was just the previous episode, which went just over 3 hours. But thank you very much for coming. I hope that this gets you some subscribers and that you'll continue doing what you're doing, you know. And maybe in a couple of, I only do one of these every 4 weeks, right? So maybe we'll have you back in a couple of years or so if I start circling back to old guests. Because
ask me the questions again. See what I answer then.
Yeah, we'll see what's going on with the Anglican Communion by then. So
if there is one,
there is one. So the next episode will probably be on the 16th of November. So mark your calendars for that, guys. And I don't know who the guests will be yet, but it will be
Margaret of Scotland. I think that is St. Margaret of Scotland. I think the 16th of November. Pretty sure.
Well, now you've definitely beaten me on religious lore there. I would not have been able to guess that.
And that's nerdy.
Yeah, I suppose so.
Saint nerd.
Saint nerdy is, yeah. All right, guys. Thank you so much for being here. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and feel free to share this live stream anywhere you think people will find it interesting. And well, check out all my products. Check out the Dungeon Ministers YouTube, and we will see you next time. Take care, everyone. All right.
Bye.
Oh yeah, currently smoking. Well, just finished smoking. This is a Lorenzetti Oversize plus Argento Roots. Take care. There we go.